And then all of a sudden, Seth's yelling at me, "Hey, Dave, like, you just heard everyone today at the warm-up room? Why are you going so fast?" And I look around and Miana had smashed her fingers the way the plates sit in the rack. It can kind of swing forward and hit that release arm.
The plates hit the release arm?
Yeah. So
that's a lot of swing. It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. All right, guys, we're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Dr. Dave Osborne. You have the credentials. I'm going to just narrow it way down, right, and say that your PhD doctorate thesis was on leadership and basically online coaching.
Correct.
Or just coaching.
Yes.
Just kind of sum it all up. Where I want to jump off, though, would be you just competed a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
So I have to know how you broke Seth's fingers.
To be clear, it was not Seth's fingers, it was Miana's.
Okay.
And we were warming up in the back room, getting ready for squats. And I think we were at like 2 reds. So really early in the warm-up rooms. And my mono at home is really stiff.
Mm-hmm.
So you can push into it really hard and get a good set and pick. The monos we were using were swing monos. Mm-hmm. So that you kind of have to come under it a little bit more, right? Mm-hmm. And get a good pick. I don't know if it was on the pick or if it was on the rack afterwards. But when I'm squatting, I'm trying to move as fast as possible. Mm-hmm. If it's 2 reds, it can move pretty fast. Mm-hmm. And I go to rack it, sit down, I walk out, and then all of a sudden Seth's yelling at me, "Hey, Dave, like, you just heard everyone today at the warm-up room? Why are you going so fast?" And I look around and Miana had smashed her fingers the way the plates sit in the rack. It can kind of swing forward and hit that release arm.
The plates hit the release arm?
Yeah. So
that's a lot of swing.
It's a lot of swing. And I've seen other monos kind of have that same swing. We have 2 at our gym. The rule is like you put your hand on the side.
You
don't grab under, right? Because the same thing, those plates will come in and hit you. And I think when I racked it back down, it swung forward and pinched her finger.
That's not your fault, though.
It's really
that's
not,
the
but at the
fault.
same
You know what I'm saying?
I think we learned really quick, like after that one, like, okay, everyone watch their hands and stuff like that. We had a little safety breathe post, but I'll take responsibility for it. And luckily he did really well at that meet and could afford some American health care for those fingers. Right?
Have you ever used the reverse mono going back years?
Yes. When my lifter Tanaya was doing a meet out at Fight or Quit, she was warming up on the reverse mono, and that thing,
it's opposite.
It's really,
there's a reason why we don't sell it anymore.
Oh my gosh. But it is. Yeah. That's really tricky to kind of get used to on the day.
Well, for a while it was very popular overseas.
Oh, really?
And at one point I had to make a YouTube video explaining that it's the opposite. Like you push into it, to kind of wedge and lock into it. With that one, you have to pull back. And it's a hard adjustment,
totally,
for a lot of people. So they're kind of all over.
You fall backwards out of it.
They don't have the visual acuity of the post. It's great for photos. That's
the thing. It's so free and open, right? It's like it's easy for judging. It's easy for this. Yeah. It also falls over easier.
Yeah. The same thing with that kind of happens with that swing that you were talking about, and a lot of the mono arms attachments.
Yes,
even the ones that we sell has got that swing, and it's like, oh man,
and that's really that's the value of traveling for competition, traveling and training on different monoliths and just different equipment in general, is that's going to be part of your meet day, is a mono or a piece of equipment you've never warmed up on in a place you've never been, right? And how well can you adjust on the day to those conditions, that swing in the mono, and that's what makes you a better competitor. And that's why I try and make sure that my athletes don't just go to one place to compete, but travel and get out and about so they can really expand that skill set.
I think going into that meet, I heard you talking to, I think it was on Trevor's podcast, that you wanted, was it 716, 524,
534 is about just an easy quick little PR.
716 or whatever.
Anything over 7 on deadlift.
The day didn't end up like that.
No.
So how did it end up? And
so for my competition that weekend,
now I should preface this is raw with sleeves.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Correct. I had originally signed up with wraps, kind of like, well, at least I'll get a bonus on my squat. That'll help the total. And then kind of like in the middle of prep, realized like, oh, you're kind of running away from your sleeve squat. Because my best sleeve squat was 740 as a super when I did my 2K total. And ever since then, it's kind of like, oh, I could beat that in reps. And I beat it. I did a 760 in reps, got to try 8. And just kind of like every time I sign up for a reps meet, it's like, oh, well, you can beat the 750. Rather than kind of like pushing myself like, well, why aren't you beating the 750 in sleeves? You know, like, yeah, I've lost a lot of weight, but at the same time, like, I can get stronger.
How much weight? This is kind of like an unboxing. I just got the Element sparkling water. Haven't tried it, haven't opened it. So let's check it out. All the different flavors here. And I will go with the grapefruit, which is my favorite flavor of the pack. Here's the test. It's good. I like it. It's like sparkling water with Element. So it's good. Hey guys, real quick, we realized that something ridiculous, like 80% of the people that watch the podcast don't subscribe. So subscribe to the channel and make sure to check out the description for more details on the guest, links to their pages, and give us a few days, but the show notes will be there. Or not the show notes, the timestamps. Hey, we're just rolling with this thing right now.
I'm Dan Paschalk. I'm the owner of Madtown Fitness in Madison, Wisconsin. As I progressed in powerlifting, I decided to open a gym. Did it right after I graduated college. I was always searching around for good equipment. I was kind of stuck to the used market just because I couldn't afford new stuff, but I was always trying to pick up elite stuff. The last few years, as the gym's grown, I've finally gotten to that point where I could make that person that I called was Matt here at Elite FTS. We replace all of our free weights with elite stuff. We've got the combo racks, amazing stainless steel uprights, all these really awesome custom features. Not only does the elite stuff look awesome, but it really increased the durability of the equipment that we have in the gym, and just kind of like the functionality and the ease of use. It's stuff that can really hold up to heavy use. It's designed for powerlifters and for heavy lifting, but at the same time, it's stuff that the general fitness type of population can also use. It's really been a game changer for us. It's just been an awesome kind of renovation of our whole space, and it's like a whole new gym. So for the gym owners out there looking to make an awesome change within your facility, make sure you go to elitefts.com, pull up kind of the sales tab. You can send an email through there and ask for Matt. Otherwise, you can even call their customer service line and make sure they connect you to him. Matt will make sure that you get completely taken care of.
At my heaviest, I was 349. And then I started cutting to get down into the 308s after my 2K total in the super. I cut down to about 290.
Okay.
And then built back into like 310, 315.
I assume that changed your leverages on your squat. Did you have to change your squat in any way?
Yeah. Not so much change it, but really get used to the leverages. I've never really been great at squatting wider. I have a pretty narrow stance for my build, and it's a lot of quad.
But you can use your belly more too.
You can use your belly, and you can stack into those quads so much better. Yeah. So that's what was hard. Was you lose a bunch of weight, and my hip flexors felt really like brittle and just really tight all the time, just dry. And so it felt like just extra pain in my quads doing any sort of weight over 5, and just took a while to kind of build that conditioning back into it. And then by the end,
you think some of that was maybe you were squatting deeper but didn't know it?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you normally have the belly there to kind of stop
it's like that tactical feedback.
Yeah. And I always squat like deeper on meet day, just because like all the inflammation's gone. I've been hammering mobility for a week and haven't done any hard, heavy training, and I just feel really good, mobile, and great. And yeah, I definitely was hitting some deeper range of motion than what I would typically be able to do as a super, which is good because it helped my deadlift.
So all this was happening as you were preparing for this meet?
I started dropping the weight in like 2020, late 2022.
Okay.
And then through 2023 and 24.
All right. So you're reacclimated.
Yeah. It was by summer of 23, I was 290. And then coming into the fall and then through this meet prep, I was gaining.
How did you come to the decision to cut weight?
I kind of was like, okay, I did 2K as a super. I'm a tiny super, like 320, right? And kind of just felt
crazy to think now.
Right. Well, and I've gotten to like compete with Dan Bell, and Dan's 400 pounds and huge. And it's just like, well, he's taller than me. So I probably won't get up to 400, but I could maybe be like 350 or 360, but I'm not gonna be able to get down to the bar to deadlift because I tend to carry a lot of my fat in my gut. It's just how it's been since I've grown up. And it's better now that I've done a really good cut and I've gotten my diet on track to the best I've ever been able to do it in my life. And so just coming into this meet, I kind of felt like I've already done a meet at 308. I knew I wasn't going to beat the 2K, but I felt like I could really beat that last 308 meet. And just kind of keep chipping away at it, get my 2K at 308, and then decide what I want to do from there. Because I want it in both weight classes. If as I get older and I find myself probably dropping weight a little bit more, I'd love to be able to just do it again at 275, that kind of thing. And just on the way down, still keep up a relatively high level of strength.
So as your training was predicting those other lifts, I want to kind of stay on this topic because there's a lot of lessons to learn from that.
Absolutely.
And, meets are a weird thing, right? Because they are a gauge of where you're at.
Yes.
But it's not really a gauge of how your training went.
No.
Because a lot of things can happen between last heavy session and meet day.
Absolutely.
Or just at the meet as well.
Absolutely.
What are some of the variables that you think might have threw that off, what the prediction was?
I coached 10 lifters that meet.
The day before? Or
I had 2 the day before, and then the rest in the session prior to. They were in an afternoon session.
You were in prime time.
Correct. So I had 3 in the afternoon session, and then the rest was all the women and myself and my best friend Brandon in the prime time.
So you were coaching lifters and the same session that you were in as well?
Yeah. So how we had it worked out was we had my lifters, Keith Valeros and Tanaya Tudor, come down, and it was really great because we had a full team, right? And they were handling everyone. My lifter, Gabby, who competed prime time the day before, was also handling people on the day I was competing. So I really only had to do the afternoon session with Jeff and Robin, and they did great. And then it was right into my session.
Yeah. Now the squat was close.
Yeah.
Right?
It felt really good. I was really happy with that squat. I felt confident. Felt great on my back. It was a good pick. I really liked my descent into the hole. Everything felt really good. And I went to push into it and it kind of just stopped.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Then did you know after that, when you went into the bench, did you adjust your bench opener based upon that squat?
I had set my bench opener purposefully really low.
Yeah.
Typically I'll just open at 5 on bench. But I set it 485 because I knew I can do 485 with any sort of day.
Yeah.
And I had a minor, moderate, grade 2 tear, strain, whatever you want to call it, 6 weeks out in my pec. I was on my second set of triples at 485, and the second rep, it just went as I pushed up. So I did a really good rehab on that for the 6 weeks I had. I benched 510 with a quality pause 2 weeks out. And just figured like, cool, I'll be good for a 512 at minimum, right? And I'm still going to take a 534 and just see how it feels. I took 540 at my last meet at 308, and that kind of just turned into a brick wall about halfway up. So I was like, okay, you hit 529, go 534, get a little PR, right? And just keep adding to it.
How did you go about after straining the pec? How did you go about that rehab process?
I always start with isometrics.
How soon after?
The day of.
Okay.
Right after.
Yeah.
Right into it. I don't let it rest. I've established what range of motion I have. I keep it under a 4 out of 10 pain, with 10 being the worst pain I've ever felt, right?
Yeah, so the isometric movement is obviously not in pain.
Correct.
Right? So that pain could be midpoint.
Yes.
Right?
So if you're under it.
Yeah. So are you hitting isos under and over, or are you just picking one?
I try and operate it I want the fullest stretch I can get in my pec, and then right above that.
All right. And then how hard are you going into it?
Typically I won't load the bar, right? And I have these little J-cup adapters that my good friend Chris Lentini made me. They're called ISO cups, right? And so you just push up into the cup. You can load the bar however you need to, and it's very adjustable to your height.
How hard are you pushing?
As hard
right?
as I can.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. Well, there's that whole conversation. We'll get into training later.
Yes, but with an isometric, that's the beauty of it,
Yeah.
is I can have a maximal voluntary muscular contraction, right? And push as hard as I stinking need to, and it's safe because those fibers aren't changing length.
Yeah. Yes. And what else did you do outside of that over the 6 weeks?
And then once I establish which ranges of motion have no pain, which have a little bit of pain, I try and stay, let's say the pain comes at about midpoint. What I'll try and do is a lot of work from chest to midpoint and then a little bit of that transfer through. So what I like to do is like push-ups off of a bar or handles or something like that I can load a little bit if I need to, but mostly I can really work on the stretch and then the full pec contraction, try and keep my tricep out of it, right? And make the muscle do the work. And then also I hired Josh Bryant for that prep, and Josh had these great little dumbbell iso holds, just letting that stretch and hold. And when I started, I could barely do like 20 seconds worth. But by the end, I can do a full minute for multiple sets. And just really the range of motion that built in the pec really, I think, made a big difference and helped a lot, especially for how heavy the bench was during that prep and how hard the intensity was.
How soon was it until because obviously you had to change the rest of the training cycle, but how soon till you could start actually pushing relatively heavy weight?
So what I like to do is can I touch the bar? Okay, I can touch the bar, no pain. Let's go to a Duffalo bar. Can I touch a Duffalo bar? No pain, because that's more range of motion. And I have good shoulder mobility. I'm not worried about my internal rotation in the bottom or beating up my shoulders. And so I'll start with that Duffalo bar, because I know if I can Duffalo it, I can straight bar it, and it's going to feel super easy. And so I'll start with a plate on Duffalo. And then this time I had time, and I went plate 25. Cool, 2 plates the next week. 2 plates and a 25 and just set little goals for myself each week. Like, cool, you hit the minimum. Do you need to add weight or do you have time in your training schedule to let it continue to heal? I'm still doing all my accessory work, still doing hard push-ups and stuff, and just letting it feel better every week. Right? And I never pushed it over the edge. I never got too far ahead of myself. And within 3 weeks, I was already back to 405 on the Duffalo. And so I was like, cool, I'm there.
Here we go.
And then we can go right back into our last bit of peaking.
So getting back to the meat then, how'd the deadlift go?
Deadlift went really well. It feels like for a long time with the Kabuki deadlift bar, I've been trying to figure out the slack and the set position. Because if you pull slack on that bar at first, you're going to set your hips too low. Then you're going to get pulled forward and then you're going to come up and it feels terrible. And so what I did was starting in a hinge position, right? Really letting my arms lengthen out as much as I could at the start to really help my starting position be as long as possible and high up off the ground. And then I would create scapular depression and hold that for half a second. Then set my hips and hold that for half a second. And when you set the hips and drive the knees forward into the bar, that pulls all the slack out. If you just hold that for half a second, so you can just feel, okay, my shoulder's over my foot, I'm going to drive forward off the floor, does everything for you. And I finally figured that out this prep, and I had some really great pulls. I hit a clean 694 for my last heaviest lift of the prep that felt I could add like another 30 pounds to easy. And so I was planning like, cool, 716 to 727, that should be there. At the meet, crushed my opener, smoked my second, all of it felt great. And then I got to my third and I just kind of gassed out right at the knees, at the legs, which happens. I've only hit like 2 third deadlifts.
Yeah. Was it a fast meet?
It was very fast, but it was also like almost 10 o'clock at night by the time I hit that deadlift. I haven't done that in a minute either, competed that late, but it was, it was fine. Like you said, it's about checking where you're at with a meet. And I knew that going in, like, man, this was one of my favorite preps I've ever had. All my lifters did amazing. and killed it and had huge PRs and did really well for a travel meet. The last time I competed in Vegas, I tore my left quad, right, and couldn't even finish the meet.
So this is a win.
Yeah, so it's a huge win. I leveled up my nutrition game. I leveled up my training game, and like just all the things that had improved over this prep. It's like, okay, you didn't hit the total you want. Big deal. I'll do it again next year.
Yeah.
Right? Like I got time.
What were some of the takeaways from that prep?
This prep?
Yeah, because you said you enjoyed this one more.
I really enjoyed
but
this prep.
there's a pec strain, so obviously there's something that led to that.
Yeah. And I think it could have just been, you first start working with an athlete, right? And you kind of just have to gauge what they can handle. And I think Josh did a brilliant job gauging what I could handle through prep, but it's our first prep together, And so when we had the 3x3 at 485, it was coming off of a really heavy week prior. And I just wasn't recovered enough for it. What I really think happened was it was written as a 3x3 at 480. And I smoked that first set at 480. I was like, okay, I'll go 485.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I watched that video coming back, and it's a good first rep. But on the second rep, I flare really early. And it's just not me being dedicated to my pause. It's not me staying tight, because a 3x3 at pretty much 500 pounds is a very challenging set technically to keep lat engagement, to not let everything loosen up as you press out and just stay in position. And I was going fast. And I was trying to move that weight really quick and everything and get in the groove, and it just got sloppy enough. Not even really all that terrible, but just enough to have that elbow turn out. And then before I know it, I'm grinding with the pec.
Have you strained your pec before?
I have.
Do you keep in some kind of like the ISO thing throughout the whole training? Pretty
much year round. I have a very heavy pec emphasis because I used to not. And then they would strain and they would hurt. And I finally got, the idea of like, oh, well, maybe they're just not strong enough. Okay, let's make them stronger. Let's make sure they have good range of motion. And so I didn't have any issues really on prep. Maybe a little early on, a little shoulder pain, but we were doing a lot of overhead pressing too and stuff that my shoulders hadn't done a lot of and just needed to get better at. And I think that was my favorite part of prep, was like all my weaknesses got addressed.
All right.
And I could really see that, like, oh, if I can just do this for another year or two, that's really going to put me where I need to be. This is perfect. Cool. Let's have this meet. It's going to show me exactly, what we accomplished, what went well, and then what I'm going to have to work on afterwards. And now Josh has that data as well, right? He got to see how the meet turned out, and now he's going to have even better, ideas on how to structure the next training cycles.
Or what I found with a lot of lifters is, powerlifting is, people criticize this when I say this, it's a sport of creating the shortest range of motion you possibly can in each one of these lifts, right?
Sure.
So if the bench, the squat, and so forth, while progressively doing that over a period of time, you begin to lose a little bit of joint mobility.
Tightens you up.
So if, say on the bench, a second rep just happens to go just a tiny bit more range of motion than what you're normally used to, there's vulnerability.
Totally.
Squats, same thing. Deadlift, same thing. So I like to see when people will incorporate on same day bottom end exercises or other days, just body weight free squats, ass to grass.
Just change that range of motion up, create some durability.
Yes. Do something to be able to be strong in those ranges. If worst thing happened, because the worst thing that could happen on a bench is you have to dump it to a side and now you're way under there.
Way.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see in lifters too, who really depends upon the minimization of range of motion and who's strong no matter what. And that's what you can do as a coach, is like you recognize like this lifter is really only a good bencher with a mile high arch and all these other things. Well, what if we have them Larson press? What if we take away that arch just a little bit? What if we give them a camber bar, right? Or something with range of motion, or loaded push-ups off of push-up handles, something that's going to take them out of their favored position that they're very strong and competent in, and just change it a little bit. And it's going to have massive carryover to that competition form.
But their ego doesn't like that.
It's really tricky.
Because it's a three boards.
It's really tricky. You have to, especially as a coach, you have to sell it to them because you have to work around that ego, right? It's like, well, are you happy with your bench now? Or if we incorporated these, what if your bench went up 30 pounds? You think that's worth it to take it away for a little bit when it doesn't matter? We're far out from comp, right? We have time. Like, let's do what it takes.
Your first meet, I believe, was in 2013.
Correct.
Is that right? So what inspired you to do that? Or just get into powerlifting?
Yeah, you did, Dave.
I did.
You did. It was so cool. I was a sophomore in college at Washington State University. I'd never heard of powerlifting before college.
Now, was that your bachelor's at the time?
That was my bachelor's. Okay. Yeah. I had just gotten back from deployment to Afghanistan and started college in the fall of 2010. And so this is about late 2010, 2011.
Did you know you wanted to go into exercise science at that time?
I did. When in high school, I took a personal trainer's course as a science credit, and you could take it for 2 years, and it got you out of math.
Well, hell, I would have done that.
Oh, in a heartbeat.
Oh, yeah.
In a heartbeat. And all you do is you go down to the gyms and you shadow the trainers. And then, you remember because they sign off on a little sheet saying you were there. And then you kind of remember what their signature looks like and you don't have to go all the time.
It's better than algebra, right?
It's much better. Yeah. And then and I had just finished geometry and it was onto pre-calc and calc. And I was like, I don't like math that much. I'm going to push into this. And I loved it. I loved everything about it. I come from a family of coaches. My dad, my uncle are high-level soccer coaches. My brother coached at the collegiate level. My youngest brothers played college soccer and almost made it onto the Seattle Sounders. Like, we're a very big family of coaches. And it's something I've been doing since I was little, right? Was helping my dad run soccer and baseball clinics in the summer and just being around that all the time. Originally, I kind of thought like, I'll go into like politics or be a lawyer or something. And when I got back from deployment, my middle brother, Peter.
Why'd you decide to go into the Marines? Let's back up to there.
Let's go back.
Yeah.
Because the Marine Corps gives you a sword.
A sword?
Yeah, sure do. When you become a non-commissioned officer, you get a sword. Big old cavalry sword, right?
So you went in for a sword.
What other branches are advertising slaying dragons on
All right,
the TV?
so better question then. Why did you decide to go into the military?
I saw it as a way to pay for college.
Okay.
I also had the notion as a young man that I should go to a war. I should go off and fight somewhere. I should, and this stuff kind of calls to me, this warrior lifestyle. And I really identified with it. And so that's what I did was junior year of high school, which was the earliest you could kind of enlist, was 16, 17. I was 17. Took my ASVAB, got a great score. I could kind of pick whatever I wanted to do. And the Marine Corps officer, there was a recruiter there, was an artilleryman.
Did he carry a sword?
He did not. Come to find out much later on, you actually have to buy your sword and it's like $400 or $500. And that's the ones that aren't even sharp. Can't even take them into combat with you. Like, come on. And so he had got me signed up through artillery. And my job was an artillery scout. And so I would attach out with infantry and call in airstrikes, artillery strikes, and mortars. And that's what I got to do through deployment and everything. And
okay.
Yeah.
So you didn't stay in.
I did not stay in. I originally signed an 8-year reserve contract. And by the time I had deployed and gotten back into like a normal reservist contract, I was already almost like 4.5 years in, just because you go from training to pre-deployment and deployment, post-deployment, all this kind of stuff. So I'd almost had like a full active duty experience the whole time. And when I got back into the reserves, and they say it's like 1 weekend a month, but it's more like 1 week a month in terms of time commitments. And it was just getting to be too much from having to drive where I was at to the unit. And then it would be 4 or 5 days out in the field. And I was a sergeant by the end. And so like if I was going to get promoted, I would end up having to leave the unit anyways, and kind of just didn't want to deal with all that. And so I was done after my 6 years. That was about 2000.
So then that goes to college to be the personal trainer, right?
Yeah. And so when I got back from deployment, my brother called me. He said, hey, I'm going to transfer back from University of Idaho, where he was studying to be an architect, to I'm going to go to Wazoo and do exercise science. I was like, oh, what's that? He's like, well, they call it kinesiology, right? And I read through the coursework and stuff like that. I was like, this is a thing? I'd already taken a ton of anatomy in high school. I was really, I got my personal trainer's license as a senior, right? And just done things like that, and just have really been about exercise since I was like 10. And so when I found that was the thing for college, I kind of just snapped at it and said, well, this seems like it's probably going to be the thing I'm going to do really good at.
All right. So while you're taking that coursework, they're not specifically talking about powerlifting.
They are not.
You know, so it's, so how did that powerlifting come in?
So I was sitting in Dr. Morgan's anatomy class. And again, this is like the 4th anatomy class I've taken at this point.
I mean, the Krebs cycle you've learned about 800 times.
God.
So many times that you forget what it is.
The biceps is called biceps because it's 2 heads. And, you know, and so it's like, okay, I don't need to be super present for this. We're in these little tiny desks, right? I call them little T-Rex desks. And I've got my little web book and I'm on T-Nation. And I see how to bench press 600 pounds. I see your bodybuilding articles that you were going through at the time, and you're huge and jacked and shredded and benching huge ass weights. And I'm like, I'd never seen anything like that before. And so before I know it, I'm on elitefts. I'm like, oh, powerlifting? Oh, it's 1 rep? Oh, I get to eat whatever I want and be fucking huge and jacked and do these insane weights. These guys are squatting 1,000 pounds. I didn't even know you could do that. It's amazing. And it just changed my entire life in a second. And I could not stop devouring content, anything related to it. Immediately set myself up with my own West Side Conjugate model of just max effort squat every day and try out that wider stance. Oh, I'm terrible at that. Okay, maybe I'll go to a box and get a little bit better. I get a little bit better, right? But it obviously wasn't going to be the way I was going to be able to squat. But like the benching and the deadlifting shot up immediately. And I'd always kind of struggled with benching. In high school, I could bench like 175, you know, and I was 250. I was just a big fat kid, right? And just didn't have the sense of awareness of how to put my body in a good position to press. And as soon as I learned how to arch so you want to learn how to bench. I mean, that was everything. I watched that video 1 billion times. And just before I knew it, cool, I'm benching 400 pounds. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing and what technique matters.
It's everything.
Now, where were you training though at the time? Because you have the university fitness centers.
That's where it was.
Oh, God.
Now, for Washington State University's credit, UREC is one of the best in the world. And we get a lot of people coming into our rec center there, seeing how it's done. Because we have classes, we have challenge courses, we have a ton of different stuff at that rec center. And at the time, we had just gotten a new head of personal training there, Matt, and Matt was a CrossFitter. And so he knew the value of decent barbells, right? Maybe something other than bumpers, and kind of redid that bottom weight room to the point where we had decent barbells. We had enough plates, you know, you kind of had to.
The barbells are huge though.
They really are. And they weren't crappy. They were not crappy barbells that we got to lift on. It made a huge difference. We didn't have deadlift bars or anything like that yet.
It's still, because somebody asked me last week on my Instagram AMA, you know, what equipment today do I wish I would have had when I started? You know, and that was one I had to think about, you know, pretty hard. And then I started to remember laying bars on the floor and like rolling them. And it's like, nope. And there's like 20 minutes going through the gym to find the right one. Bar. And even with that, there would still be whip and elbow and shoulder shit. So to have a gym that just has a good bar
makes all the difference.
Yeah.
It was huge. I remember when, because we didn't have monoliths or anything. But we wanted to pretend like we did. Like, oh, that'd be cool not to walk it out.
Oh, just arch. Yeah.
So we'd unrack and a buddy would lift up the J cup
Oh God.
Or even worse, we'd use the pins. You just pull the pin out, squat, put the pin back in until your buddy can't put the pin back in on time.
No,
you're sitting there holding it. Yeah. Thanks, Tate.
Yeah. It's a good theoretical idea.
Yeah. In practicality, terrible implementation.
No. So at what point did you migrate to a gym that had lifters, or did you stay in that same facility? I stayed at
UREC all the way through, because we had thought about it quite a few times. Okay, what if we ordered a couple bars, a couple plates, we go get, a locker or a storage unit and train out there. But UREC really did a good job with us and really kind of like took care of the lifters there to the degree that they could for a college facility. And we had a great group of people that came at different times during the day. We didn't have like a formal like club through the school, but we had a club.
Yeah.
It's the same 10 guys. We were getting girls coming in. And we just started. It was myself, Nathan Brandhorst, Brandon Kibler, and Eben Mahama. And Eben was an animal-sponsored athlete at the time. He would go train with the Lily Bridges in Chicago and then come back and train with us. And so, like, we had this incredible, just like already connection early on.
And they're all students too. So the consistency is going to be way better.
Totally. All we have to do is like go to class, but all we have to do is show up to train.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you get your master's and doctorate there?
No, I got my bachelor's at Wazoo. My last year there, they just started a kinesiology internship program. And I was at the time about to have my son, and I couldn't take an unpaid internship. It just wasn't going to be in the cards for me. And there was only one unpaid internship available for strength and conditioning at Wazoo. And one of the other trainers, Casey, had it, and I wasn't going to like try and snake that from her or anything like that, even though I knew like that's mine. And so what I did was I went to my advisor and I said, hey, I can't afford an unpaid internship. And I know this just came out, but what if I move back home? The rest of the credits I just take online, but I use this internship as an 18 credit to finish my degree. And I start a garage gym and I document the process and go through everything that it takes to like start that and get into a full facility and build a business and use that as my internship. And they said, yeah, go for it. So that's why I did my through 2013.
Is that your gym now too?
That's my gym now.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So then what inspired you to get the doctorate? Because now you have a business, you have a kid, a family, right? So there's all those, and it's like, hey, I'm going to just study more.
Yep.
It
was after I started the business, a couple months in, I ended up in a divorce with my first wife, which of course worked out very much for the better for both of us. And I'm very glad. That's something we had decided to do early on. We're great co-parents. My son has a really good life. And it worked out really well for both of us to where we're in great places now and we can co-parent really well together. And at that time, I had kind of already been thinking like, man, I need a master's. I need something more, right? To stick out in the field. I need to improve my own knowledge and understanding of this area. And I just don't think I'm going to do it by watching YouTube videos and articles.
Now, was that understanding for you to be a better coach, or was it a selfish understanding to become a better lifter?
Sure was, Dave. Sure was.
Well, that's a common theme.
But I think that's okay because in chasing and pursuing betterment for myself and self-improvement, I can show others what I've learned. And that's really valuable for me as a coach, and something I really recommend to others too, is keep pushing yourself, keep learning yourself. Cause it's not just going to be, I read something in a book and now I share that with others. If you never really applied it to yourself and like what the struggles are going to be with implementing that or whatever that knowledge is going to be, like knowledge without any sort of use is kind of just like well, that might work. Be great if you know it would work, especially if it worked on you. And so when my master's came around, there was, I was just looking at online programs because that was realistically what I was going to be able to do. I wasn't going to be able to travel and go to a lab somewhere or anything like that. The local college didn't have anything, I'd be interested in. Honestly, Washington didn't have really any programs for a master's level exercise physiology that were really
interesting.
anything that I was going to be able to do or really wanted to do. And so I found Concordia University of Chicago, and they had been doing online education way before the pandemic, and we're kind of at the forefront of it in terms of how they put it together. It wasn't just like going on to an online classroom, making a couple comments to a peer and done.
Yeah.
It was very well thought out. It was very engaging with the professors. You had a lot of leeway in what you could study and what you could present on. And it kind of just, it felt like that was what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
I was really drawn to it.
Another point with what you're saying, and I find this with a lot of lifters that their degrees or masters or PhDs, is it is a selfish endeavor.
Oh, yeah.
But at that same time, throughout my own college career, when I pivoted and went that direction, I didn't have to study as much.
No.
I actually wanted to go to class.
Yes.
Because now I'm interested in what this is, because how's it going to help my training?
Yeah.
And what a difference that made.
It's night and day.
It was a difference of trying to cram, before test for classes I didn't give a shit about and doing really bad on, and really not having to really study at all because you want to go to class.
Right.
Like going to class helps. You wanted to go to class and absorb all the material. So when it went to study to cram for it, it's like, I already know this.
Been there. I listened to this whole lecture. Oh, it's really
So it's I push back on people now because it's not as bad as what it used to be. When I was coming up, it was like, what do you want to get a degree in this for? What are you going to do with this?
How's it going to make you money?
How's it going to make you money? Right? There's no established career paths.
Right.
Where now it's probably still kind of the same, but it's not as bad.
Right.
Because there are established career paths. But
I remember for me, it was you can go into athletic training, you can go into strength and conditioning, and you can go into sports med. That's what it was. Those were your paths. Some people would pivot off to like chiropractor school as well. That was kind of like a fourth little thing in there. But that's really what kinesiology students were seeing as their future.
So what made you decide to get the doctorate then in leadership coaching?
I really enjoyed that master's. I got a lot out of that master's course.
So the leadership course as your master's or the kinesiology?
My master's is in applied exercise physiology.
Okay. All right.
And I did a focus on sports nutrition. And so I got my nutrition skills leveled up from that.
Let's pause for a minute. That's interesting, right? Because when I started to get into like nutritional biochem and stuff like that, you get exposed to a lot of bullshit really quick.
And everything's for running.
Well, yeah. Well, not just that, but and the classroom was teaching me, like how a gram of protein metabolizes, right? And then you're looking at everything that's in the supplement industry and that's in magazines. You're like, this is bullshit, so I think everybody should take some course.
Sure.
At least that, so they can, like, this branch chain amino acid has the exact perfect, profile, for muscle growth. And I'm thinking, oh, wait a minute. It has to break apart.
Yes.
To digest.
Right.
So what the hell? Did you have that same type of,
yes.
You don't get that with the first nutrition classes.
No, you don't.
Just,
and you have to dive into
food guide
it.
Pyramid,
right.
Stupid shit. But after you get past that.
And I think that's what draws me to education too, is it changes the lens with which you're able to view things. And the things that look really shiny and too good to be true, you can see why they probably are too good to be true. And it gives you better context and it gives you better awareness of what you're consuming, what you're training, everything that you're doing. And it's it makes it for a better life for me now, especially with social media and everything, where my bullshit meter is really dialed in because I have this extensive education that I put myself through so that I don't get sucked into those things. Because that's what happened to me in high school is I was a fat kid and I was relying on, whatever fat burner or hydroxycut or whatever it was, right? I remember taking hydroxycut hardcore and I'm setting up junior prom and I'm just sweating.
God. Yeah.
Or like, the horse pill NO2, right? And just like all that kind of stuff. And thinking that was like the typical American, right? That's going to solve it for me. When I didn't eat breakfast, I binged at lunch, right? Just had terrible nutritional practices. But I don't know any better. I'm a kid, right? I can't expect my parents to know any better. They have their own issues with eating and, diets and stuff like that. And that was just the culture in the 90s and the early 2000s was you're not going to know what to eat. You're going to eat what's on your plate and you're going to finish your plate, whether you're full or not, right? And just kind of go from there. And
so with your doctorate, your thesis, what was your thesis on?
So my thesis, my dissertation, the title is, the title of my dissertation was of course, now I'm going to blank on the name of it. The thesis of my dissertation was that higher frequency online coaching and a communication schedule would be better than a communication schedule with online coaching that had low frequency.
Frequency as far as contact.
Correct.
Okay, so it's
coaching
essentially it's on online training,
yes,
right? And then trying to determine if the contact of once a week versus 3 times a week,
right?
Where that's broad. Did you have to go more narrow than that?
So how I had it set up was I had a really good talk with my dissertation committee beforehand, where they kind of said like, Dave, this should be something that should really match what you think, about online coaching. And do you think in any, setup that fewer communication interactions throughout the week is better than more communication interactions throughout the week? And I said no. So what they said was, then you don't need to do a group in your study that has 0 communication. What you can do instead is randomize that communication. So that's what I did, is I had 20 participants, 11 men, 9 women. And then by the end, it was like 3 had dropped out, 2 men and 1 woman. And so with the group of 17 that I had, what they would have is 4 training days a week. And I randomized on each training day for each participant when they would receive coaching. And they would either receive no coaching for the day, coaching before they trained, or coaching after they trained. And then how do you define what that coaching is? Because the coaching after they train would be different than the coaching before. It sure is. And I built that in.
Okay.
So pre-training, this is what I want you to focus on. This is what I want you to get excited for. This is what we're trying to accomplish today, right? And really set the tone and give them goals and let them know what they're supposed to do. Post-training, review of technique, gauge on how hard the session was, right? Check in with them on recovery. Hey, is everything going good? Are you staying hydrated? How's your nutrition been? How's your sleep, right? And kind of just do a little post-training check-in with them.
And then what was the third?
And then the third was no coaching interaction for the day. And so what they would do then is they would still send all their videos, all their notes for the session, right? I instructed each participant to send me at least 2 videos of their main lift for that day. And then any questions, or if they want me to look at an accessory or something like that.
So they're in control.
So they're in control.
All right. So how did you account for it's different coaching?
Yes.
So the post, you're able to look at the lift, analyze the lift and so forth. So that becomes another variable. So that's not you see what I'm saying? Where the same coaching, I'm just trying to think of how you would lay this out in an experiment. The same coaching would match all variables.
So the post would always be taking care of review, right? Check-ins. The pre was always focused on here's the goals for the session.
But you see what I'm saying? Those are two entirely different.
They are different things. And so what we were measuring in the study, the effects of communication scheduling on affective state, which is mood.
Yes.
And then the coach-athlete relationship. That's what we were really measuring.
All right, that makes sense.
Yes. Because you're right. They are separate coaching interventions, but they both have, or both were shown to have effects on lifter mood as well as the coach-athlete relationship.
Okay. So as this progressed, what did you discover?
So as it was a 12-week study, at the end of the 12 weeks, in terms of mood.
Well, stop there. Were these intermediate lifters?
These were lifters. That's a great question, Dave. I specifically set it up to have lifters 300 to 399 dots.
Okay.
Which I would call an intermediate.
Yep.
And then the ages was 18 to 40.
Ooh, shit. Okay. Yeah. So you got different maturity levels.
Yes, because that's what I work with day to day in online coaching. It's not just 18-year-olds. I get 25, 30, 40, 50-year-olds. Right. And I have to know how they're going to respond to all this kind of stuff. And it was really cool watching, the 18-year-olds and the 40-year-olds pretty much go through the similar training program. It had RPE in it, right? So they could auto-regulate to the degree they needed. But I really don't think any of the older participants skewed results to a negative degree in any way. Like they really kept up and made great gains. And so over the course of the 12 weeks, the main variables we were measuring was affective state, which is comprised of valence, which is happy, unhappy, calmness, which is calm or a little manic, wired, right? And energetic arousal, which is, are you full of energy or are you really tired? And
how was that scaled?
It's scaled on a 7-point Likert scale from a mood questionnaire by Willer and Shoby in 2007. And so all my testing batteries were already pulled from prior research besides the self-efficacy, which I kind of had to modify a little bit from prior research. But all the rest were already valid and reliable testing batteries.
All right. Then what was the conclusion?
And so the conclusion was that pre-coaching and post-coaching interventions had a significant effect on valence, the happiness of the lifter, compared to no coaching interaction.
Well,
sure.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Science said so. Great. And so on days with no coaching interaction, lifter happiness was markedly lower, right, than on days with coaching interactions. I also measured, within the affective state, the valence was the only one to show a real relationship. We had a lot of complicated data models that we were using, and calmness and energetic arousal didn't show that same relationship, which probably makes sense, right? Like interactions with another person probably aren't going to markedly make you calmer, or unless,
And how were those interactions? Because this is online.
Yes.
So is this just text
this
only?
Is
it
text, video, audio.
Got it.
Everything. And it was left to me as the discretion of which one it was going to be for the day. And earlier on, it would definitely be more videos as I'm explaining technique and higher end concepts. And then, text messages for the smaller stuff, but a lot of audio messages as well. That's kind of my default, is to go into audio, because I can send a much fuller, detailed message than I can with text, and a lot quicker.
So was there a difference between pre and post?
Not a significant one. It was pretty close to both.
And again, this is measuring those variables that you're talking about.
Yes, this is measuring lifter mood, essentially.
Yes.
And then, so lifter mood was affected in terms of happy, unhappy. I also tested for extrinsic motivation, because it's based on an interaction with a coach. It's not intrinsic. And then also self-efficacy. And we didn't see any big changes over the course of the 12 weeks there.
Yes.
But those were put in as covariates to kind of just see a bigger picture and see if, and see really where those relationships were lying over a 12-week study, because there is components of motivation and self-efficacy involved with coaching.
Well, not measured, was there a difference in the strength after the training?
Very much so. So the average lifter put on 70 pounds on their total in that 12 weeks, about 20 points on their dots, 35 pounds on their squat.
All of them?
All of them. This is the average for the study.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. The mean improvement. Squat was a mean improvement of 35 plus or minus like 20 pounds. So,
was it higher with pre and post communication compared to?
So everyone received everything over the course of the 12 weeks.
Okay.
So each day was randomized. So you may have no coaching on Monday, coaching on Wednesday, pre-coaching on Friday, no coaching on Saturday. The next week, it could be a totally different thing.
Yeah. So when you move this into your own coaching model, because you coach in person and online, so we'll stay with the online. When you move it into your own coaching model, you know, the business side of that becomes problematic.
Yes.
Because if it's to be, you know, after each session compared to once a week, you know, your ability to scale is going to be smaller.
Sure. So you probably have to charge more.
You have to charge more, right? So there's a lot of coaches that are just, they're just like the once a week. So
that's what it was when I started I started that study. This is 2017, around in there. That's what everyone was doing, was these once a week check-ins. And they were crap. They were not good. I mean, there was a lot of technical feedback that had to occur in one day. And now you're doing that after the fact. You squat on Monday, you're getting feedback from coach on Sunday, right? Or I got to remember this for my next session. Right? With no pre-interventions or anything like that. It's a lot to put on the lifter to try and check in everything at once, which means they really have to keep notes during the week and then send that on. It's like, if you're going to keep notes during the week, why can't you just text your coach with what happened during the session?
Well, I would think that would be easier.
It is easy. And it's the better workflow.
Yeah. Because if you have to review everything on one day.
And that's hard for me. I'm going to sit there with 50 clients on Sunday and go through each one's entire week. There's no way I'm going to stay mentally fresh and engaged for that.
Have you looked into the origins of the online training, just say for powerlifting? Because if I'm to hypothesize or just guess, it probably came out of looking at bodybuilding models of helping people cut weight, which would be that weekly send me your image, send me your weight, and so forth. And then somebody would take that model. I'm just guessing. Somebody takes that model and says, hey, I can use that for powerlifting.
Because in reality, it's not that far of a stretch. It's, I send them a program. They send me back what they need to adjust, right? And go from there. But even then, and I remember in early powerlifting, like my buddies Nate and Brandon, Nate got coached by George Lehman. Brandon got coached by Brandon Lilly. And all they're getting is like a 10-week spreadsheet. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, maybe. Right. And a lot of times it was just copy and paste.
What everyone else got it. Yeah. Now, to a point, that works also.
It does.
People aren't especially early on, you're not a snowflake the way you think you are. It works, and we all got stronger, but it can be better.
Yeah. And I think it's changed a little bit because people realized, hey, this is the same spreadsheet that I'm getting.
Yeah.
And sometimes
and you would compare with your buddies. Oh, yeah. Like, hey, did you get a block pull 3x5 at 85%? Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. It was a funny time because a lot of the coaches wouldn't even change the name. On the spreadsheet, where
that's always my worst nightmare.
Like, just leave the name off, right? Just don't even put their name on it, and it was interesting because I would get sent these and like this is exactly the same thing. And that's not even your name.
Nope.
So
this is for Dawn.
Yeah. But it's evolved, right?
It has.
So how did you go about, were you online coaching before you were doing the
study?
Doctorate? Yes. Yeah. So how did you go about changing what you were doing based upon what you learned?
Afterwards, I got really good feedback that people liked the pre-coaching interventions. They liked hearing from me prior to training, or just like going into the session knowing what the goals were. And so I decided, like, okay, when I send out programming, I can either send out goals with that program, like, hey, on this day, this is what I want you to focus on. That's what I do with my my lifter, Damien. Super strong guy, but he wants to know more, right? And more than you can like just text back and forth. He wants to know the why. And so he asked, hey, Dave, when you send the next week's program, will you just go through each day and just say why you're doing what you're doing? no problem, right? And so that's what I do for Damien is, okay, day one on these day one's his deadlift. He alternates deadlift and squats each week. Okay, this is our heavy deadlift day. This is what we're working up to. If you're in this range, I think we're going to be really good for where we're at in training. Then you're going to have bench after that. This is what we're trying to accomplish on bench. We're going to go a little bit heavier this week. This is your secondary bench. I'm also going to keep this heavy for an exposure this week because we're building that back up, and we'll recycle it back in a couple of weeks, right? And just get you some good exposure. And then your squat's going to be a little bit lighter this week, but we're going to do it on a safe squat bar or duffalo and just change the movement pattern of it a little bit just to make the intensity go up without having to actually increase intensity.
Yeah. What I'm interested in is the mood going into the training. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of intangibles associated with training, right? Yes. That doesn't get discussed enough, right? Where you can be, say it's a heavy 80% squat day, 85% squat day, whatever it's going to be, like fives, decent fives. That same lifter that can go in confident for that set to the lifter that might be a little scared, like, I don't know if I have five, to the lifter that's overly aroused.
Sure.
To the lifter.
Goes overboard.
To the lifter that's, maybe coming back from an injury and a little bit timid. Those are four different mental states that can impact how somebody's going to recover from that set.
Absolutely.
The more confident person more likely is going to use more acceleration. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be a little bit easier. They're going to recover from that. The one that's doubting, maybe it's a quad tear they're coming back from. So now their eccentric is a little bit slower without them really knowing or being aware.
Yeah, they're not super aware that they're fighting it.
So now the recovery is a little bit higher. Yep. So if you can manipulate, not bad word, coach, that better mental state going in, that's going to definitely impact outcomes.
It's huge.
But to do that, you might be at the expense of coaching post, being able to fix and see technical flaws.
Sure.
So out of those two, obviously it's dependent upon the person. Yeah. Out of those two, which one can bubble up as being the most important?
I would say post is probably going to be your most important. If there's any sort of technical work that still has to occur, if there's anything happening during the session that you have to fix, post is going to be important. Where pre is really important, like you said, is, okay, we're coming back from injury, or we have very tangible goals for this session. Maybe you're just a little down and out of it, and a little motivation from coach can really help see you through. I think that's something coaches could probably do better at in the industry, is understanding, like, this person came to you to be coached by you. They already have an inherent need for your approval. Yeah. They want it, right? And so if you know when to give it, it's a very powerful thing because, oh, good, dad's proud of me, right? That's the feeling when coach is proud of you is, oh, this authority figure is really happy with what I'm doing. I want to do some more of that because it makes me feel good to make others feel good.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're doing the most amazing things and you have greater self-efficacy and all these other great things. But it just starts with that little bit of belief that someone else has in you.
Yeah. So with those intangibles being, just that mental state, that's one way to kind of work around that, where you also work with people in person, where that's a way different experience because you can see when they walk in the door.
Oh, yeah, you can.
They're not walking the same way. Right. Whatever it's going to be, they're not there. Where how do you accommodate that for somebody that would be the online client?
So let's say we have a typical week, and let's say I don't know anything's up. Right? I don't know anything's going wrong. And this is really good too, because this kind of gets into a little bit of like conflict management too, because, you may see a terrible session from your lifter and just want to chew them out. Like, are we even trying here? Can we put a little bit of effort into just trying and bracing and doing the things you know how to do? Why am I correcting you on the fundamentals? That's one way to go off on someone versus, hey, something looks really off today. What's going on? How's life? Are you sleeping? Are you eating? How's your wife? How's your kids? Right? And really kind of get into it with them. And it's knowing how to kind of, is this a bad session because it's a bad session? Or is it a bad session because something else is going on? And you're going to find that out post. Or what really tends to happen is I'll check my phone. I'll see a message came in from a lifter And sometimes that message is, oh, coach, it's just not happening today. And I have scheduled check-in times, right? I have 3 or 4 scheduled throughout the day that I mass group everyone into depending on when they train during the day, because I have people all over the world.
Yeah.
And so I have a morning group, afternoon, later afternoon, and evening. And sometimes when I see those messages come in, I'll kind of just break that little bit of, oh, I'm not going to wait to talk on that. I'm going to address that now. And you get a little bit of coaching in the moment, but it makes all the difference in the world because you didn't have to wait 3 hours to respond, you know, and you can kind of just nip it in the bud, which I always think is better in the long run. It takes more from the coach time-wise, but I'm a full-time coach.
Yeah.
So I should be coaching full-time. Whether I'm in person or online, I'm going to see the message and I can choose to either wait till the check-in period if it's not important, or if it seems pretty urgent, I'm going to address it then and nip it in the bud and kind of go from there.
With different personality types, right? So it's, I found some lifters, you know, they're driven more from certainty.
Sure.
You know, they kind of need to know exactly what's going to go on all the time.
Yes.
They would not be good with a conjugate type of program. And then other ones that are driven more from uncertainty, you know, so, and those are big variables.
Yeah.
Because if I'm trying to push somebody into a conjugate and they're driven by certainty, this is not going to work.
Right.
It's just not. And I'm not going to change them.
Sure.
You know, as some coaches think they can do, you just can't.
No.
You know, so it's got to pivot. Have you found that same thing?
Yeah, you definitely see what people gravitate towards and what they would prefer. And luckily as a coach, right, I've worked with a bunch of different systems. I understand the basics and the intimate parts of a lot of different training methods. And I can kind of meet the lifter where they're at in most cases. Like Logan and Nate do a very conjugate style approach and they have amazing results. And then I have other lifters that, you know, maybe are more intermediate and need a little bit more frequency, right? And so they're going to be similar to a more daily undulating kind of setup, where other lifters, you know, only have to only get time to train 3 days a week. Cool. Let's just do a squat day, bench day, deadlift day, right? Or just make it nice and simple and just kind of meet people with where they're at, with what their schedule can handle, and then like try and modify from there. Once they have the basic, you know, training program and outline going, and you've got good consistency over weeks, that's when I can start feeding it to them. Hey, what do you think if we add an extra training day? Do you think your schedule could allow that for the next like 3 months or something like that? How's work? Does it have that open time? Or do you need to dial training days back? Well, what if we did an accessory day and 2 like SBD days, and we'll have still all our main movements, but we'll have like some variations in there, right? And just really, you know, progress it the way your body can handle right now. And that's definitely what I do with my intake forms, is kind of get an idea of what have you done in the past. And I ask them, what have you done? What has worked well for you and what has not worked well? And based on their answers on what's gone well in the past and what hasn't worked well, I get a better idea of what they need going forward.
So how do you go about building that relationship from that intake form?
That's really good. So like even going back to my study, coach-athlete relationships take a little while to really build. But even over 12 weeks, by the end, I had very high scores on those questionnaires for the coach-athlete relationship in closeness, commitment, and complementarity. Complementarity is kind of the big one at first, and that is the working flow between coach and athlete, that rhythm they get into. So, you know, you're in person, you're watching someone lift. Cool, let's add 15s. We'll add 10 and 5 each side. They go and they grab the deadlift jack. They pop the bar up. You walk over to the plate tree with them. You hand them a 5. They hand you a 10. You come back. That's complementarity, right? It's just synchronized flow with your coach. And so that kind of has to build first, is that working flow. You send check-ins on these days. These are the kind of things I'm looking for in your check-ins. If your check-ins come and don't have enough information, I'll ask for what I need and then send it as a reminder of, hey, when you send in check-ins, I'd like this information provided. Right? And you start building that working flow. Okay, I can send coach check-ins on these days. Coach sends programming on these days. If I have questions, I ask before I get to my session, right? Or else coach is going to remind me like, hey, you had all week to look at this program. Why are you asking me a question on your training day? Right?
Yeah.
And we build that complementarity. And in the study, that built really quick at 4 weeks. and I tested it at 4, 8, and 12 weeks. And then it maintained high the rest of the training time at 8 and 12 weeks. And once that was built, then closeness and commitment could then scale up. So once you have that working flow with your athlete, that's when you can start getting close with them, right? Start building some relationship of trust and support and like, hey, I got you. Please give me the information I needed because I really care about your results. And then the commitment grows as well. Like, man, coach is really on top of things. He really wants to see me succeed. He's giving me all the things I need. I should do right by him and give him everything he
Now,
needs.
when you're on the other side of that, say where you are now with Josh,
Yes.
you know, how do you take the reins? Because a lot of people listening to this, they won't be coaches, they will be the athletes. And, you know, a lot of what I've said over the last several years is that there's just as much responsibility on the athlete as the coach.
Very much so.
You know, they can't bitch about somebody being a bad coach if they're a bad athlete.
Right. And
Yeah.
you know, I had that very firmly in my mind when I signed up with Josh because I hadn't worked with anyone since Trevor.
Yeah.
After I tore my quad in 2017, and I loved working with Trevor, and so I already had a good experience with coaching. And I traveled down to a seminar that Josh was doing in California, met him in person. He looked at my lifts. We had a good time, and just decided to pull the trigger. It just felt like, well, this opportunity is right in front of you. You should seize it. And so as an athlete for Josh, I just try and give him everything I think is relevant. And I remember he made a comment like, man, Dave, you get a little wordy. You really give me a full picture of the week. And I said, yeah, you know, I want you to have as much data as you can have to make good decisions. And it was like when the pec tear happened, I told Josh like, hey, I have a really good rehab method for this. I'm just going to take the reins on that and do that. Let's keep pushing our squat and deadlift. They're fine. I love what's going on right now. If you have any suggestions for me for stuff that would be helpful, let's talk on that. And he did. He had the dumbbell flies. We had some more shoulder work that kind of went in and just some other little things that really tidied up that rehab, and it went great.
Yeah.
I try not to like burden him with dumb questions because I know the answer most of the time, but like there was one that I kind of just needed him to say it. And that's on the pendulum squat, is that the Arsenal pendulum squat, the counterbalance is 180 pounds. It's already heavy.
Yeah.
And then he was giving me a weight on top of that. And I said, hey, is that weight including the counterbalance or is it on top of? He's like, what have you been doing? On top of. Keep it there.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And I just needed him to hear it because it sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks doing a pendulum at freaking 250 plus pounds on that thing. It's hard. It hurts. But you got to do it. Yeah. And I just needed him to say, you got to do it.
Do you use any large language models or GPTs or anything now just for any work that you do? Like Chat GPT or any AI
I don't know how to do it.
Okay. Because my question was going to be, how do you see that helping the coaches moving forward?
Oh.
You know, because...
To get a computer to do everything for them?
Kind of.
Does that help them?
Yeah. Well, I can basically prompt in a powerlifting program in Chat GPT, and it will spit out something that's very good.
Sure.
And then I can go through and prompt through and make any changes to be able to have that better program.
Okay.
And if I'm to fast forward with the speed to which these things are going, and just hypothesizing, it's just a matter of time until you'll be able to put a video in there and it will be able to break down the video if it's bar path, bars. We already have apps that can determine velocity.
Sure.
You know, so now if you have that in there, then they can put that in there, then the correction is going to be, it can just kind of build out.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see how that is going to impact impact would probably be the good word, because the coaches could use it to their advantage, you know, or it could replace them if they're a shitty coach.
Very much so.
If you go back to just the copy and paste the week to week to week, they don't need that. You know, they can just go, I want to do a cube program, or I want to do 5, give me week 1. Boom, it's week 1, and it's pretty much dead on. So if you're not using it, then you won't have the understanding of the question with that as that moves forward. But what I don't see it being able to do are the things, those intangibles that we were talking about. You have to assess the mood and the accounting, and all those other things where it will be able to take the broad strokes, which may be able to help a coach with time management, to be able to knock that kind of down, but it still isn't going to replace the mood.
No, I don't know how you would replace human to human connection.
I don't think you can.
Right. And that communication, it's so deep, and it's what we're all programmed for as a species, is community with one another and senses of belonging and bonding with one another, and being able to look someone in the eyes, right, and have a conversation with them is so much different than, and it's why I love in-person coaching. And I really don't see that being something that
that won't be. And it's the online, if the coaches don't have some type of communication, personal interaction that they're doing, they're going to be obsolete. But they'd be obsolete anyhow, because those coaches don't last.
Well, and that's what I love about my gym too, is now I have a meeting place for my online lifters that are always welcome to come in, and I can work with them in person and get that hands-on time. And that's something a lot of my lifters really take me up on and make use of, is they'll fly up from California, right? They'll fly across the US to just come in and train for a week. And it's something I want to be able to facilitate at a greater level, as my business continues to develop, and really make that an option for people to come.
I think that's a huge thing, right? Yeah. Because there's certain things you may be trying to get them to do technically.
Oh my gosh.
And if you could just touch them.
Yes. And I'm big on that. I'm big on being able to physically touch and correct a lifter in time.
Yeah. When we look at your education, so there's like the bro science and the science. So you got, and if I break it down into education versus experience, and you have both, right? So before I have a little rant, so I now laugh when the bro science people are like, the PhDs and white coats don't lift weights.
Tell me, lift weights.
There's a lot of them, right? There's
especially now.
Exactly. Yeah. So that argument doesn't work anymore when you got elite lifters with PhDs and you got bodybuilders with PhDs. Yes. You have there are people that have both. And it's probably worth listening to them.
I would agree.
And there still are, the far end of just the bro science.
Sure.
But there's enough people that feel both to be able to kind of go in there.
Yes.
As you've navigated both of these worlds, what have you seen the differences or frustrations between that?
I get really frustrated when people discount the value of education. What are you going to go to college for? How are you going to make money with that? In my head, money and education aren't the same thing. I can make money in a ton of different things. I'm educating myself to make my life better, to make the lives of those around me better, and to be able to share that knowledge and make the world a better place. That's why I chose an educational doctorate, an EDD, over a PhD. Is the EDD is very focused on taking all the research you've learned and everything you've studied and put together, and now how do you use that to help others? Right. And that's why I wanted to be able to do with my online coaching was terrible when I first started that dissertation. There wasn't high frequency. There wasn't good communication strategies between coaches and athletes. It was just a mess. And by being able to dive into how does distance learning work? How does observational learning work? How can I put these things together in a good, succinct package that accomplishes the goal of performance enhancement, right? But also psychological well-being. That's where that coach-athlete relationship is the performance enhancement stacked with psychological well-being. And I want it to be successful and effective.
So would you think that a lot of the coaches, they like the X's and O's?
Sure.
Right? And just deep dive into that, all periodization models and all these other type of things, where those intangibles being the psychological aspect.
Right.
I don't think they pay enough attention
and I think that's a real shame, because like periodization, is it that hard? Right? Is it that complicated? Linear progression, doing a little bit more each week. Oh, you can't this week? You can't do more? Cool. Maybe we just recycle back and build up again. It's not the craziest concept versus like the psychological components. These are huge, especially if you have people that have only been on the hard skills, right? And they haven't done anything in terms of like visualization, right? Or breath work or anything to kind of give them that competitor's mindset that makes all the difference on the platform between being so nervous that you can barely focus and you're puking before you go up to take your first squat versus existing in that moment and loving every second of there because you're on the platform with your best buddies maxing out. Like what gets better than that? And if you can change a competitor's mindset from that nervousness and instead reframe nervousness to, you know what nervousness is? Your body priming itself for something it's a little excited to do. Those shakes, that's your neurological system priming itself for the incoming physical demand. Your body's literally readying itself to do exactly what you need it to do. Lean into it. Don't shy away from that. Lean into that excitability, that shaking. That's your body saying, let's go. It's excited. It's not nervous. It's excited. And we can start to reframe a little bit.
Well, a lot of that reframing, because that excited state can be misinterpreted by many as anxiety.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Where the overreaching state can be misinterpreted as depression.
Sure.
So where I guess I'm going with this is communication's a vital skill. And I don't know if they're being taught that through the exercise science path.
No, I would not say that's being taught in your formal education in the exercise pathway. But exercise science really pairs up well in a lot of schools with psychology.
Okay.
Right. And you get that minor or something, right? Like we were fortunate that we had a sports psychology class as part of our kinesiology. I did another sports psychology as part of my master's and a law psychology as part of my doctorate because they pair hand in hand. And I'm a really big believer in the connection between the body and the mind and the soul and everything else, right? Like how your body interacts with the environment around it. It dictates so many things in terms of how well we feel mentally, the relationships we're able to engage with in others, like everything's connected. It's very holistic. And I think that was kind of a big theme of my education as I was going through was seeing the rise of like holistic research and trying to do both qualitative and quantitative, trying to get hard data, but also asking people how they felt at the time and just try and see things in a better holistic kind of view and lens that everything's related. Yeah.
And I want to go down that path, but that's also based upon the assumption that coach and client know how to communicate with each other. Or you get what I'm saying? So we're making an assumption
you're right.
that a coach knows how to listen,
right?
Which could be very false if they don't, or the client,
knows how to communicate effectively, or could even listen.
So if that's where I see the biggest missing point is, the coaches just do this.
Yeah.
Right. And they don't, then they get pissed. I'm like, that's not their fault.
No.
You didn't know how to communicate what you wanted to do.
And something that I've worked together with Paul O'Neid to put together is the essentials of online coaching at Coach's Corner University. And that's exactly what it goes over. Is I did the online coaching communication part and Paul did the business part. And it's a very robust online course that tells exactly how to communicate, what ways in which to communicate, when you're communicating, what to look for in your clients, right? And the coach is going to be the leader in that, right? And if you're,
of course,
and if you're not happy with how your clients are communicating, that's what you communicate to them. Hey, I really don't like it when you just send me a video with like bench 315 by 5, and that's all I get from you. I'd like to know how you felt during the session. I'd like to know if there's any recovery demands that are, being asked of you that are outside of normal. I'd like to know how the session went in general, and I'd like you to elaborate and give a fuck about what you did and just sent to me, right? Yeah. And if that's not happening, that's on me as the coach. Right. And if it's upsetting me, especially as the coach, I should probably do something about it.
Yeah. Well, it's your own accountability.
Exactly.
Right. And now with assuming that the I'll go a different direction. I was going to say, assuming that the communication is solid, how do you get them to work on their mental skills? But I'm going to just take that out and say, how have you developed your mental skills over the last decade?
Man.
And that's a broad, let me narrow this down because it's super broad, right? Because that mental skills also goes into how you arrange your life.
Sure.
So at the broad level, if you're not living by your values, you're going to be under stress, right?
Yes.
So
conflict.
Exactly. So it's hard to visualize when you're stressed out because you're a dickhead, right? So we can just kind of put that out there. So what are those broad assumptions, controlling the controllables and stuff like that really should be in place before they begin to look into visualization and all those other types of things?
The best place to start is with breath work generally, and an awareness of the body. When you feel upset, what does upset feel like? This is great because this is kind of the stuff, I have a 10-year-old. Mm-hmm. And so raising my son, Michael, my second wife, Joy, was really, really helpful in putting together some practices for us in just communicating better. Oh, you're upset. Dad took away PlayStation time? Okay, well, how's it feel to be upset? Hot. Okay, your skin feels hot. What else? I'm sweating. Oh, okay, you're sweating. So you're a little bothered. And you start to feel the physical manifestations of your mental state, right? And just creating a better awareness of that. And that's very difficult at first, but everything in life is skill building. Mm-hmm. And everything takes practice to get better at. And so it's okay if you're terrible at first and you have a hard time recognizing what your mental state is. Personally, I'm a disabled vet. I have a 70% mental disability rating for PTSD and depression, and I struggle really hard with swinging from one end to the other emotionally, from calm to just red hot mad, and back again in like 3 seconds. And for a long time, it was really difficult to kind of keep that managed, and it would just get away from me. Right?
Well, how would depression, because when people speak about anxiety and depression, they're again, very broad words. So it's, I like to ask, how does that manifest in you, right?
In depression with me, I withdraw. I stop being involved with people around me. I'm very secluded. I'll tend to go on really long reading or gaming binges, like a week or two, and really just not leave my house, which is terrible because it just, when I would do that, it's very much reduced now because I've identified it as a behavior of that depression. And
that's where I was going to go next with that is how do you identify that as that behavior? Then how do you break the pattern?
Typically what I'll do is I'll give myself a day or two because there are times when my brain's tired. That's part of PTSD where I do not have the mental energy to engage in anything outside of my normal routine. And I just need time off on my brain. And I'll give that a day or two. And then I'll kind of reassess like, okay, is this getting better? Do I still feel like I need to be shut in or anything like that? And after a day or two, I tend to make sure I'm going outside.
How do you know? Okay. How did you become aware? Like, so when you know that, because a lot of people aren't aware,
right? Oh, this is what I'm doing.
Runs and runs, right? So how quick can you identify?
I'd say it really does take a day or two to tell the difference between, is this just me needing a break or a little reset, or am I depressed?
Yeah.
Obviously, and winter can be bad too.
Yeah.
When I do my blood work, my vitamin D is pretty low a lot of times. So I have to make sure I'm taking extra vitamin D, which definitely helps. And when things help, I try and take a mental note in the moment of like, or even say out loud, this helps. I feel better. And just that verbal acknowledgement really helps it pick up again and come around the next time that event occurs. I had to start getting therapy, right? And seeing a counselor for that and really making the strides on recognition and I feel when I'm depressed, my body feels a little sick, right? It feels a little extra sore. It feels just really slow. And I can kind of tell like, oh, is that starting to get worse or is it just not getting better? When was the last time I trained? Okay, I took a training day off, kind of things like that. And just really do a quick mental inventory of, am I avoiding things? Am I putting things off? Am I procrastinating? Is that aiding to the depression as well? Because the thing about depression is it makes you want to sit there and do nothing.
Yeah.
And so what's the antithesis to that? What's the cure? Go do something. Go be with people. Go out for a drive. Go out for a walk, right? Just get out. Go do something. Get your body in motion. And once it's in motion and doing something, I feel a sense of accomplishment. I'm good to go.
All right. So getting back to the breath work, because I kind of went down a different rabbit hole. So keep going on the breath work.
So with breath work, I think that's absolutely one of the easiest, most accessible and helpful things that you can have as a skill set. There's a bunch of different tempos that you can do for different things. It's pretty easy to just look up and research. I'm a big fan of box breathing in general. I do a couple different versions of it, but I try and do it whenever I'm driving in the car, whenever I have a moment, even when I'm reading or playing video games or just at home. I try and control that breath as much as I can throughout the day.
And did you learn the box breathing when you were in the military?
I didn't learn shit.
Well, I asked because,
gosh, Dave.
A lot of people I know in special forces, they have to, they train themselves to be able to fall asleep fast. And a lot of the times it involves,
which it does. I do a really good breath work. I actually learned this one from like Wim Hof, but it's a 10-2-10. 10 seconds in, 2 second hold, 10 seconds out. And you get your respiratory rate below 3 breaths a minute and you will fall asleep. And it's great too when you're even at night, right? You have mental chatter in your head and you can just counting those seconds in your head. It's the same as sheep. It gives your brain a task to do that doesn't let other thoughts come in and out. And meditating too, and learning how to just let a thought go was really helpful.
Well, when the meditation has to come before the visualization, right?
Yes, it does.
I think James Blakely explained one time where people will say that they can't visualize, but yet they do daydream. They think about their lifts when they drive to the gym. So they're kind of already doing it.
Well, and even like, I can't visualize. Can you close your eyes and see what your hand looks like? Can you look at your hand right now, close your eyes and remember what that hand looks like? You can visualize. It's a skill. Yeah. It's going to take a minute to go from hand to arm to shoulder to head, but I've had to do that with people before.
Is that where you start, is with the hand? Because it is a skill and a lot of people get frustrated.
It depends where they start. Yeah,
because they think everybody that can visualize a lift just closes their eyes and it's a perfect lift. And they don't realize there might be one out of like 30.
Yep. Nope. I'm going to have to redo that again in my head. Nope. Did it wrong. And that JM table talk you did, that first one was so massive, Dave. Like that, I think that really blew the lid off of visualization as a whole. And it definitely got me interested in it. And ever since that one, I've done it every single day for all my lifts. And just it makes all the difference in the world. And you talk about that fear, right, of combating that, someone's coming back from injury. It makes all the difference in the world if you've practiced that lift 1,000 times. You've hit a bunch of good ones in that 1,000, right? And you didn't tear your quad off in your head and you just stood back up with it. What do you think's going to happen? When I visualize now, I feel my body twitching, right? And responding to it and going through the movement. I was like, cool, that was a full rep and you're tired afterwards. There's mental energy that goes into that. I made a joke a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, does anyone else have to periodize their visualization? I'm exhausted after that.
Right, I mean, and it is a skill where, there's that arousal curve, right? And everybody sits in different places on that curve where, with my own training over a period of time, I find where that needs to be.
Yes.
And it's different what block you're in, or if it's a meet, it's going to click up a little bit or whatnot. Then I can anchor it, so when I'm in that, I picture red, write FU on my fucking singlet or whatever. And then that's that anchor that has been triggered over years and years and years of doing this.
Conditioned to it.
To where, it's just, I can start by just closing my eyes, see red, then it's going to start to go wherever I need that to go. But where I think people can get into problems with that arousal curve is what you were speaking about earlier, is yes, there may be drastic cases where you need to be a screaming lunatic because nothing else is working.
Sure.
To me, that's like that. The only time you're going to see that is everything else has been exhausted.
Yeah, this is my last
the
shot.
only thing that's left. Yeah. And you realize when that happens, your bench and deadlift is probably going to take a tank.
Yeah, if you're doing that for squat,
yeah, there's a trade-off.
Very much.
But finding where that needs to be to have confidence.
Yes.
Right. I think it all comes down to confidence. Some people need ammonia, some need music, whatever it's going to be to have that confident state. Some people don't need that at all. You know, it's just breath work and chill.
Yeah.
And that's been one of the most interesting things with me over all the years is you're in a group of lifters or you're to meet with lifters. You're like, man, what the hell's wrong with this guy? He doesn't even get psyched up. Imagine what he could do if he really got psyched up.
If he really
I'm like,
cared.
yeah, he'd bomb out. You know, it's like
way over threshold.
Yeah, because there's just some people that just always chill. You don't know what's in their brain.
You're right.
You know, they're confident. So why do you want to get them jacked up in this super aroused state where how did you go about finding where you need to fall on that bell curve? Because you have that competitive number, right? And my belief is that there's a training max and a competitive max.
Yes.
You know, optimally, it should be a variance of like 10 or 15%. I understand a 1,000-pound squat's different than a 200-pound squat,
Sure,
but there should be a big variance between that, right? Because there's a deload, there's the mental, there's all these other things that play into that. And we'll get into training, but it also goes into you shouldn't be doing triples with what you plan on doing in the meet. If your mind is set right, you know, I don't want to say it should be there, you know, but
you should be confident. You should have built that momentum up.
Because the bigger you can have the differential between the training max and the competitive max, the healthier you're going to be able to go into a meet, and the healthier lifter on said day is going to have a better day. You know, but they got to not overreach, you know, and, oh, this is a great day. They got to understand the trade-offs.
Yes.
You know, they kind of go with that. But before they can even get into that, they need to understand how this arousal curve impacts the recovery of the session that they're doing. You know, and if you're in a depressed state and it's a squat day, you're still squatting.
Yes.
Right. Your recovery demands from that squat at 80% is going to be different than the 80% when you're not in a depressed state.
No, you're feeling great.
Right. So there's regulation, you know, that you have to make because of all that. But again, if you don't know how, you know what I'm saying? Like,
if you don't even know where your baseline mental state's going to be and where too far is and where too low is and have experience finding that groove, it's very difficult.
Yeah. So how did you navigate that? And how do you navigate it with lifters you work with?
I think how I navigated it was when I'm training and, you know, lifting heavy and everything, I'm having fun. And I'm really enjoying myself. And I found if I yelled too hard or got too amped up, that shake starts to come and then I can't control the shake, which would probably be like my first 5-6 meets, especially for squat. That shake going out to that opening squat of like, don't get reds. Don't be high. Okay, just get that lift. Squats are over. Oh, I can have fun again. And just kind of, again, practice is always going to be the number one thing, and getting exposure and getting used to that and how you're going to handle yourself. But I think with like success, that makes the biggest difference. And something I try and show my lifters, right, is like, I really dislike misses unless it's something technically they need to learn, right? But
I agree.
I really hate misses. And I've gone years without missing, and then I'll miss like, you know, 6 in a year or something like that. And go another couple of years or whatever. But not missing builds crazy confidence, because what do they know otherwise than I go down, I go back up, right? And the more you can kind of like just take the idea of missing even being possible from their head, the better. And so when you're putting together training cycles for yourself or for others, the more successful reps you have, the better, the more confidence you're going to build. And I really try and use that as positive momentum throughout the cycle. And if I have to be a little conservative at first, I'll be a little bit conservative and get them through their full training cycle and through the meet day, especially if it's their first meet. If I can just get them to go 8 for 9, 9 for 9, maybe they just miss on little technical things, but nothing that was them not being strong enough, nothing that was me pushing them a little too far. That's later. right? Where misses aren't going to mess with you mentally, and you can still have good confidence that you're going to do the weight. But early on, I really try and just maximize the time with success. And that success builds better competency and confidence than anything I can really tell them to be prepared for. And then on top of that success and those good made lifts, now we can talk about, okay, let's go into either some light visualization or some breath work or whatever kind of I think that lifter is going to need or understand before the big stuff. The other stuff I try and tell them too is like, it's okay if it's heavy.
Yeah.
You know, like that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You're a very strong person lifting very heavy weight. That's the sport.
It's going to feel heavy.
Give yourself permission for it to feel heavy because you are so fucking strong. And that's what strong people do is they pick up heavy things. And you kind of just like get them that little bit of taste that, oh, it's heavy, but you can do it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, you know, and that does so much of the work for me that if there is like some sort of mental strategy I have to implement, it stacks on that good experience of, oh, well, I don't really miss. This is what we do is we hit weights.
I remember when it was before I came to Westside and I knew Matt Dimmel more than I kind of knew Louis. And it was one of the meets that I was at and it was my third attempt. And I remember him saying something to me along those lines. And it was basically just, look, this is going to feel heavy as fuck, but it doesn't mean you can't do it.
Sure doesn't.
And it just clicked with me because as soon as I picked it, I'm like, fuck.
Yes.
And then it doesn't mean I can't do it.
Totally. There's permission to feel that. Like that's not a bad thing you're feeling. That's what you should be feeling. You're pushing yourself. You're giving your body something it's never done, but it can rise to that challenge.
Yeah. Whereas before, the way I would have approached that mentally is I would have picked it and be like, man, this is heavy. Then just get really fucking mad. Right. Because now, what do you mean it's heavy? Are you doubting yourself? You fucking puss, you know, and that was different than just accepting it.
There's a little bit more of a cost to that too.
Yeah.
Because you go up a little bit higher on the mental arousal curve.
Sure.
Right?
And that was the difference between having to aggressively just go through a lift in a manic state to actually being able to think through the lift.
Yes.
Whereas you become more mature as a lifter, you have to be aware.
Yes.
You know, body position.
And it's like, I think if you can maintain your awareness for 8 out of your attempts and then go hog wild right on that 9th one, that's a great strategy too. Yeah. Like if you really enjoy just going all out on something, maybe not squat because you still have the rest of the meet to go, but a bench or a deadlift or just adjust bench and deadlift accordingly. But some people really need that permission, right, to just go all out on something. And that's what they need to feel like accomplished for the prep. I have a really hard time with that because I know what the fatigue feels like afterwards. So it's really hard for me to redline on that. But if I have to, I know exactly what I'm going to think about. I have that little Rocky moment packed away in my memory, right? That does, even just mentioning it, I'll get goosebumps. I can feel my heart rate elevate and like my body knows like, oh, you're thinking of we know what you're thinking of. It's time to go out there
and through time and visualization, you'll be able to do both. You'll still be able to get and there,
bring yourself back.
But you know, as soon as you start to descend on a squat, you're still
mindful.
You're mindful. You're tactically feeling where you are in space.
And those adjustments are huge at those max effort weights. And a lot of times I'll give people that heavy exposure because that's what they need to learn is right. Like, your rep work and your triples and doubles is pretty spot on, but we get to that single and you start shaking, your bar path starts to deteriorate a little bit. That's where you need to learn the groove is because that plus 10%, plus 15% is a completely different lift in how you have to adjust in real time. You can't fight it either. Right? Or you're going to screw it up. You have to ride the lightning. So you have to be confident as you're doing it, direct it where it needs to be in real time and come back out of it with all the aggression you can muster to complete that lift.
It's a different skill acquisition because it's heavier and you got to feel the tension.
Yes.
You know, where it is, where, you know, being a geared lifter that provided tactical feedback.
Yes.
You know, because it's
you
all
can feel
there.
It on your arm.
And
you can feel it on your hip.
And I think that's where there was a time when guys that would lift in gear, they would come out of gear, you know, and go raw, then have this big tank, you know, drop. And then would blame it on the gear. The gear made me weak. I was way stronger before I put the gear on. But then usually in about a year, now they're way stronger.
Picks up again.
And it's, because of this program or whatever it's going to be, they're way stronger because of that. All they did was they lost the tactical feedback that the gear provided. They had to develop it without the gear or the wraps or whatever they're using for that.
And I love gear for that reason too, is like that tactical feedback. I love squatting and knee reps. It's really fun. It tells me where I need to be. I love every once in a while, if we can travel over to Tri-Cities and go bench with Ryan Kennelly. Like that is the most fun you can have in powerlifting, is being in gear, in my opinion, and having a crew like that to set you up in it really well and just put the most maximum amount of weight you can on your body and just get after it.
Do you, with your wrap squat to your sleeve squat, does your technique change in any way to get more out of the wraps?
I don't think so, because I have a pretty moderate stance with a lot of forward knee drive and a lot of quad involvement. So I throw the wraps on, it just helps that. Especially with like the thicker sleeves. I think it's very similar to the wraps in that way, and that you just push into the sleeve and let the sleeve support you and do the work that way.
Now you work with a lot of powerlifters. And you have this military background, but you also have a strength and conditioning background. So when it comes to the periodization, just the training aspects, how does it differ from your powerlifters to football player, tactical athlete?
Obviously powerlifters are going to have the focus on the main three and a higher level of specificity. And my tactical athletes, my regular athletes, we always make use of a specialty bar in most cases, an SSB for squat. Not always a trap bar deadlift, but deadlift off blocks quite a bit.
How would the long-term programming look, just from a broad base looking at that? Because the powerlifters got distinctive.
Powerlifters trying to develop 1 rep maximal strength, right? My athletes have to juggle a lot of different demands on their time. And so they have to be able to run faster, jump higher, change directions, accelerate, decelerate. And so, yes, there's barbell components involved. I'm very fortunate in that a lot of the athletes I work with come to me for the strength part of the strength and conditioning, and they have good technical. That's the thing too, is like, yes, I could have them push a sled or do GPP work, and I do. It's good body armor development on the body, right? And things like that. But for specific sports like football, like if I have a wide receiver and I have them doing farmers walks and stuff like that, is that the same level of GPP and what they need for their sport as running routes during practice, right? Yeah. I try not to confuse the weight room with the sport room and let the weight room be the weight room. Let's get stronger. Let's get faster. Let's improve the basic metrics, and your sport coach can work on the sport skills with you.
Yeah, well, all qualities are going to increase if somebody's stronger.
Right.
I guess there is.
Especially with like the high school semi-pro that I tend to work with, like it's not crazy complicated things, if some of them get to the point where they can learn Olympic lifts, that's awesome. But, most are going to go to college, and that's probably what their strength and conditioning coach will end up working with them on, or they'll be on kettlebells or whatever else. But we can do all the general work they need to be successful later on in higher ed sport. And it's the same thing with the tactical athletes. It's, finding out what their testing is going to be, how long their rucks are going to be, what the real demands are going to be. Okay, let's put together just a real smooth and simple strength program to that. If you need me to periodize, your conditioning aspects, we'll get an equipment list. We'll get a list of the testing that you need to do, and it's the same thing. Like you don't train for a marathon by running marathons. Right? You train for a marathon by starting slow and building up over a course of weeks.
So you're building their program based upon what their testing is going to be.
Pretty much.
Like you would a combine athlete or something like that.
Yeah, especially for the tactical athletes, if they're looking for like their physical fitness test. Or I just worked with a buddy who was doing a different leadership like sergeant's course that was going to have like some pretty significant physical testing in it they need to be ready for. And so it was just progressively adding a little bit of load to his ruck, progressively moving those rucks a little bit further in distance, right? But at the end of the day, too, they're tactical athletes, and they've been doing it for a minute. They know how to run. They know how to get around and everything. And you're just trying to keep it manageable for them so that it's well thought out, and it's not them just going crazy ham every week and show up destroyed for school, right? And so when they get there, they're ready to go.
So it's still building the absolute strength over a period.
Yeah, for the most part, if it's not the biggest need, especially for the tactical athletes, and it's more muscular endurance, we'll have a little bit of strength to facilitate the muscular endurance. It's the same thing like you have a combine test and your max bench is 250. Do you spend time doing the reps, or do you spend time getting that max up a little bit? Yes.
With now the powerlifting, when you lay that out, where would your bias fall, right? Because so I have this bias in conjugate, but that doesn't mean if I'm going to advise somebody, that's what they're going to do, right? Half the time, more than half the time, it's probably not, because it depends upon the skill level. So when I ask this, it's about your bias, but it doesn't mean that's what you're having everybody do.
Right.
So where would that bias fall after competing for a decade?
You want to say it depends even still, right? I guess, my bias is always going to be top set back offs. I think that's just the easiest way to set up, whether it's multiple frequencies a week. If I have multiple frequencies a week, I can have one day that's dedicated heavy, another day that's dedicated rep work. For deadlifts, sometimes that depends on people's recovery and whether they can pull more than once a week. And that will train with like training age and as a lifter develops as well. And part of it can be, where do I see them where they're at now as an athlete? And if we look at like long-term athletic development, where do they need to be successful in powerlifting? Do they need to grow? Do they need to lose weight? Do they need to work on technique efficiency on one lift more than others? I guess it kind of looks at where I need to prioritize first. But I know no matter what, if they have a heavy exposure and some rep work afterwards, that's going to do the majority of everything I need.
Now, with the back off sets, are they linearly progressive over time?
If they're online, they most likely will be. If they are in person, I'm loading the weights as I see them on the day.
All right. So how can I give an example here? If I have somebody that is using conjugate, it's some max effort stuff, right? So for a lot of lifters, that one rep single exposure, if it's an advanced lifter, that's probably more than enough, right? If it's not, they're not technically efficient.
And are you doing the lift to get better at the lift, or are you using the lift to grow?
Yes.
Is the other question too.
There's a difference between somebody that can fire on all cylinders and somebody that's firing half cylinders, right? So if they fire on all cylinders, their recovery demands are way higher than if not. So most people are not that. Right. So if they're running through different waves or blocks.
Yes.
And it's 8 weeks out, right? So that max effort exposure, then after that, it may be, because it's fives, I'm thinking fives at that point. So 80% week one, 82, 84, whatever it's going to be. So linear, that will go, but it will be based upon that max lift they did that day, so it's not off the meat. Right. Yeah. So are your back off sets based off that main lift that day? Because it could be a single, it could be a triple, it could be a five, right? And then what's the percentage breakdown?
I do not base my back offs on the effort that day. Okay. I program very conservatively with percentages, and I use meat maxes. Okay. That's why I can program. It's the same thing as when Wendler took 10% off and go to a training max. I just don't take 10% off and I drop the percentages by 10. So a 5 for me is at 75%. That's where our start is. That's the floor. And then we can auto-regulate from there. So what I like to do when I write it out is, here's a minimum percentage for what we're going to accomplish today. If it's conservative, that should take into account any recovery of it. Variables. Then I'm going to give it an RPE rating as a cap. At most, I want it to be an 8 today on these 5s. Then if we're using velocity, I'll also give them a matching velocity of where that should fall at an 8, based on whether it's squat, bench, or deadlift, because they'll have slightly different numbers. So I'm trying to create the best picture in their mind of what that effort needs to be for the training day. And it also gives them a range in which they can adjust and auto-regulate. So that'll be for like the top main sets.
Yeah. So you're hitting it from 3 different angles.
Yes.
Okay.
Just so that they know like what I mean by a hard set of 5 or a moderate set of 5 or whatever it is. So,
well, that's super important when you're dealing with an RPE because, am I allowed to be psyched up for it? Am I not? There's a lot of variables, but if you're looking at, those 3 things, as guides, then you're mitigating the potential risk of not anchored. Like an RPE to work has to be anchored between coach and athlete, where that allows that anchoring, from 3 different perspectives.
Right. And it's something they're going to get better at over time too, because let's say they're also using velocity. Now they have that velocity reading to really dial in, well, was that an 8 or was it an 8 before that last rep? Right. And then you have a velocity drop in a
Now, have you found that velocity is going to be significantly different amongst individuals?
Sure is, Dave.
And different amongst lifts?
Sure is, Dave.
Well, I asked that because, there's a lot of, it should be 0.8 meters per second.
No,
like for who? Like for who?
Right. And didn't Louis want like speed work at like a meter per second?
I guess you could say that, but it was based upon what our best speed work was, so you could see.
Oh, I like that.
So you could just see. We had a Tendo unit in there one day, one bench day. And, I remember walking in the gym and the bench was, it was when the blacked out windows and shit. So the bench was right there and there's like a fucking string on the bar. Like, what the hell is this stupid ass thing? And so he's trying to explain, what's going on. I kind of get it, but I don't really give a fuck. And then it had this little dashboard, that would say
the computer.
that.
That's why I have
and it was a speed day, and this just turned into the biggest clusterfuck you could imagine because George Halbert and Jerry Obradovich were faster than what I was, but I was up in that. I was faster than I was strong. Yeah. Right. So this just became into this fucking, who can be faster? And then, where's
that contest?
Well, it was, but at the same time, what we started to realize is if we just let the bar fall.
Yeah. You can cheat.
We don't control it.
You can totally
we just
cheese
what
it.
Ended up being by set 6, 7, and 8 was just a clusterfuck of what a bench should have been.
Yeah.
But it was way faster.
Sure.
So the Tendo ended up in the dumpster in the back because of all that.
What do you think would have happened if you'd done it on max effort day instead? You were still trying to go as fast as possible. Do you think you still would have ended up relaxing and dumping in and letting it fall?
No, because
you still have that weight,
right?
You still have that competition between all 3 of you.
Sure.
That's when I really love velocity
training. With warm-up sets and stuff like that, I could definitely see that. Yeah. When this was just that dynamic day.
Sure.
So the weight's not that heavy, the band or whatever on there. There's a lot of room for fuckery. Because the weight's not that heavy, where some interesting things I've seen with it is one of the universities I visited was using that, and they were using it to know when to stop a set.
Yes, the velocity drop off.
The velocity drop off. Yes. And the iPad would be in view of the athlete, and they're Division I football players. They don't want to squat.
No.
So my question to him was, how do you know they're just
not like sandbagging?
Just after like 2 reps, they just slow down because they don't want to do fucking 5 or 8 or whatever it's going to be. And then a month later, he flipped it, so they couldn't see it, and all their repetitions went way up.
Smart.
And I'm like, well, there's some intricacies with all that.
There is, and there's great research on that too. I've written a few, papers on velocity training through school. Is something I really enjoyed researching. That velocity drop off. There's some cool kind of studies on that because they have 50%, 60% drop offs and 5% drop offs in these studies, and the 5% reduction in speed gives all the same hypertrophy and strength gains as the 50%. So you realize it doesn't take much velocity to drop off for that set to be done, and you don't need to do anymore. And you can either recover and repeat the effort at a higher velocity, which is great for the muscles and contractile forces at a high rate, or just be done.
So how do you do that if say you're using it for yourself?
Yes.
Somebody else has to tell you.
I
I
keep the tendo facing me.
Yeah.
So it's always within eye line. I just kind of like that.
Doesn't that change your overall focus for the set though?
It makes me go faster.
Okay.
It makes me try harder. If I don't, especially, and I'm aware of like the limitations of it and where those drawbacks are. So I try not to let them get the best of me. But when my training partners and I squat together, we're trying to beat each other every single set. Like, oh, Robin just squatted 405 at a 0.6. Okay, I really gotta move that one today.
Well, that's putting in that compensatory accelerate, basically speed work as your warm up sets.
Yeah.
You know, so.
And you get warm way faster that way than you can just kind of go.
Well, yeah, intent is everything.
Intent's everything.
Yeah.
And that's why I love the velocity is right away you get, oh, my intent matters. My intent has a tangible effect on the bar speed on that bar. And, you know, I remember my 2K meet, I brought my tracker with me and I was hitting 500 pounds at a 0.6, just flying up. And it just gives you all the confidence in the world. They're like, this is my day. Everything's right. And like, that's what I really love it for is the days it affirms that you're doing amazing. But on the other hand, there's nothing worse than the days where like, oh my God, I'm moving so slow. Like, why won't this?
Well, one of the pushbacks that would be associated with dynamic overtraining or speed training is, you know, past a certain age, which those physical qualities are no longer developed.
Deteriorate a little bit.
Right. So it's worthless because you're not going to be able to increase it past teen years or whatever the development age. And, you know, my counter to that was, yeah, but as you get older, you can lose it.
And you can maintain it for a longer time.
So you can maintain it for a longer time.
Which is kind of where I feel now at 36. Like I don't move the same as I did like 28 or whatever. But in most ways, I'm still stronger in better shape and things like that.
Yeah. And I think that it can also be a good measurement tool for technical efficiency.
Very much so. Because you get into that set, let's say it's a triple, first rep's flying, second rep flying, third rep, big drop in speed. And that's what I can see online too, which is really valuable, is that big drop in speed. Go back, watch the video, like, oh, is that technique related or is it fatigue related? And it's huge. They can come back that next set, tighten up what they need to technically, and then that speed jumps back up again.
How have you found the reliability of apps to be able to track this?
There's some decent ones. Vitruvi, I think that's how you say it, is a pretty reliable VBT unit. I always tell clients, get one with a tether.
Yeah.
The reliability is not great without the tether. It's a very simple tool when it just has a tether. I don't like the apps that like take a picture of like a cap at the end of the barbell, because then what? You're always filming from the side, right? That's not valuable.
Yeah.
And so, I use a Tendo. I really like the Tendo company overall. I've gone through quite a few different velocity devices over the years, from like open barbell to the push, you know, and just different ones here and there. And a lot of companies are hard to like get a replacement, because it's, again, a piece of nice technology underneath a loaded bar. Yeah. And that bar is going to crush the shit out of it every once in a while. And it's the worst thing ever, but it's going to happen. And so Tendo is really great because they will sell refurbished products. You don't have to get a brand new one. So whatever part breaks, they'll just sell you that replacement part, send it over really quick, and it's really good customer service. And I think that's something I really value now.
As you've been tracking it with your own training, what have you learned from using it and tracking it for the time period? So kind of how I use velocity is I won't even call it meters per second a lot of times. I'll just use the person's name. Dave's per second, Jeff's per second, you know, Chris's per second, because it's so individualized. You know, motor fiber types within the body, just how people are fluid with their motor pattern. And, well, that would make sense, right? Yeah. Because if somebody came up through a gymnastic background, they're going to be more explosive than somebody that did.
Yeah, it's just what those pre-training qualities they've already created, what they are and how they exist within the person. For me, squat is the most reliable with velocity, where I know at 0.3, that's probably my RPE 8 for the day, maybe an 8.5, and I've got maybe one more jump after that I'll be able to successfully complete. Whereas other people might be able to grind a little bit more on a squat, and maybe there's this like a 0.22, 0.25 is kind of that 8 range for them. What I've also found is that for bench press, it's really convenient to track range of motion in between reps just to make sure like I'm keeping my arch up, I'm keeping my lats set and things like that. But speed doesn't really matter so much for me. There's not going to be a huge difference between like the speed at 455 and the speed at 495 because it's going to jump off my chest quick. There's going to be a little bit of transition time before it hits the triceps, and then it's going to go to lockout. And they really start to kind of look the same. And so I get very little change in velocity on my bench. And then deadlift is a pain in the ass to use velocity on because most of the time the tracker won't register it.
Well, with that too, I'm wondering if, if it's a power bar.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
or an axle, right?
Totally.
That's different because you don't have to have that patient setup as you would on a kabuki bar. So a kabuki bar, the start is not going to be as aggressive as the mid pull. Actually, the kabuki bar is like 3 pulls.
Yeah.
Like a start, mid pull, then the finish.
And then the lockout, that extra width.
Yeah. Where an axle is like 1 pull.
Yes.
So it changes that.
And it's a lot for that tracker to try and keep track of. Tendo is pretty cool because you can set minimum and maximum like tracking heights, which can help with that. But not every device can do that. And I don't even use that on my Tendo. And so if people are going to track like their benches and their deadlifts, I generally refer to the literature on that, on just kind of end ranges, where a deadlift's can be 0.12 to 0.14. That's where you're capping out at. We've all seen people pull grinders that are like a 0.05, but again, you're probably not going to hit that in comp after like 8 reps.
No.
Or 8 singles. Same thing with bench is if it starts getting around 0.14, 0.15, like you're probably close to your top end.
Now, when you're working your accessories, not the main lifts, then when we're speaking of intent, right? And the intent being the effort that you're putting behind the rep.
Yes.
How does that change, or does it change at all when you start working? Now, as we work through a training day, let's forget about the back end accessories, the bottom ones, right?
Sure.
So the main
barbell variants.
The barbell variants, the ones that you're using to build the main lift.
Yes.
Not saying those other ones don't, but it's a different classification.
It's different. And that's why I kind of go like main lift, variation, accessory.
Yeah. So in the variation, what is the intent there? And then is there any emphasis are you using the Tendo for that as well?
Yeah, it would depend on the movement, I think. If it's like a board press or something like that, I don't think it hurts, but it's probably not as relevant as the main lift. If they're using their variation as the main lift for the day, I'll have them track velocity like that. If it's a board press day instead of to the chest, I'll have them track that. If it's like a block pull or something like that, they can, but it's,
Now, but the intent still is.
The intent is still, I want a perfect replication of the competition movement, as much as possible for that variant. And I want bar speed.
Okay.
And I want aggressive lockouts. I want immaculate touches and positions in the hole if it's squat, things like that. The intent is still, I want maximum acceleration on that bar.
All right. So now when we get to the bottom of the training day, the accessories, where's the intent there?
The intent is in the muscle. I want to feel it engaging. I want to feel it working. I want to feel the burn.
All right. So now it's slower.
Yeah. The tempo's gone up, right? Whether it's a 313, 414, like classic bodybuilding kind of thing, which is like, I think that's a skill you have to build as well. Cause like I get a lot of people that aren't super familiar with bodybuilding in general. Whereas when I started, that's what you were coming from. All you knew was bodybuilding type stuff. This is powerlifting, so it's a little different, but you still have this great base. I grew up with like HIIT training. That was my favorite kind of bodybuilding style, was all the Mentor stuff and everything.
Well, with those bottom things, as you become more mature as a lifter, and let's say for some reason dumbbell presses are one of the bottom exercises.
Sure.
You realistically could probably get more out of the 70s than the 140s.
Yes.
and that's what people have a hard, and less joint damage, less wear and tear, less systemic fatigue, all that gets reduced and more muscle training than actually.
It's funny you brought up 70s because that's the heaviest dumbbell I have in my gym. Because like your average person who really needs 100-pound dumbbells, there's going to be like 3 people in my gym that could even use them. And I can still do dumbbell seated press with 70s, go really slow, feel everything I need to need. And if I need to use more weight, I'll put it on a barbell and go overhead press like that, or a Swiss bar, right? Like I can add the load where I need it, but with like a certain point on dumbbells, the bell gets so thick that it starts reducing range of motion.
Yes.
That's why, like in high school, I loved dumbbell bench. I couldn't bench at all, but I could dumbbell bench the 150s. Well, it's because they stack on your chest. And then
the best ones were the plate loaded ones where you could put the quarters on.
Yes.
And it's just a real short one. I did a lot of that shit too.
Oh my God.
And then you go to a real dumbbell and you're like, oh shit.
Oh no.
Like, this sucks,
it's
man.
Not the same. It's like, I remember when I was first, my dad would take me to like our local racket club for the gym there. I was 10 years old at the time. And I do every machine in there and stuff like that. And I love the chest press machine. And then fast forward years later, my buddy has a free bench in his garage. Well, I can do like 300 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
On the chest press machine. No problem with these 95s here. Staple myself with 95 pounds. Yes. I think back that I saw people do, before I got into powerlifting, I was weight training for wrestling. Yes.
It was a universal machine and all this kind of shit. And then we used to go from wrestling to the Y, and that was just, I'm just going to call this stupid shit training.
Yep.
I'm 12 or whatever. I can remember doing curls with my arms across the flat bench with a cable pulling this way. And we were doing for a half an hour.
Oh, just over.
So you just keep going up, set, down, set, over and over, just stupid shit like that. But the one day, and I still remember this one dude, he would come in and his back was always just calloused, like really bad. And he would always squat 315, never go heavier, but he had to do like 40 reps. I mean, it was stupid how many reps. He'd do like 10 or 15 reps, hold the weight, pull his leg up in the air because his quad would be cramping, kind of like shake his leg out.
Just kind of.
Yeah. And then like go to the next one. And I remember seeing this and I was asking him at one point, like, why do you do this? Yeah. I was like, well, if I go any heavier, it bothers my back. I'm like, okay, so 315 is your threshold and this is just where you just stop. But I always wanted to do that. Like I want to do 315 for like a half hour or whatever the fuck it was.
That's some time under tension.
Yeah. Then, eventually you get into a powerlifting gym and you realize that's first off not that heavy.
No,
secondly, you don't do that stupid shit. It was like just as default. But it's interesting how what you come in doing.
No, they do it every week.
Yeah. Well, obviously it's calloused, man. His back was just trashed from this whole thing. With the intent, though, getting back to if you run straight hypertrophy phases.
No, and unless someone like just needs some time off from the heavy stuff, that happens.
Yeah.
Especially again, we go back to like long-term athletic development. Like it's totally cool to take 6 months if you're going to be doing this for a couple decades and just do some dedicated hypertrophy. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. Well, I've seen a difference in coaching philosophies over hypertrophy training, if it's a phase or if it's even just, bottom end strength work, where, some will use the phrase, strength hypertrophy and like bodybuilding hypertrophy. And the difference between the two is just the intent.
Oh, okay.
Where if it's, a hypertrophy phase for a lifter, then the intent of all those reps is going to be as explosive and as hard as they possibly can. Where if it's like for the bodybuilder, it won't be.
Right.
So that's been an interesting concept that's been going through my brain, and I like to ask different coaches about that, where I could see that fall post meet.
Very much.
Right.
Yes. Or even,
but starting with the bodybuilding style first and then leading into, so it would physically go into more explosive.
Yes.
Instead of just jumping right into that after meet.
That's kind of where we're at right now is like, we finished up the meet. We're like, I guess we'll do, I normally don't jump into like high reps after a meet without like a bridge to kind of like get someone there. Cause if you've just been doing singles to jump back into 10s or 12s.
What's that bridge look like?
It will depend on the person and their work capacity and what they think they can handle. I'd like them, let's say it's pretty low. I'll start them at 5s, right? And like, okay, you did that weight for 5s. Can you do it for 7? And I'll drop a set off and then we'll go do something else afterwards. Okay, you did it for 7. Can you do it for 8? And I'll just add a rep each week and see what I can kind of build them to and just kind of check with that. And if they get stuck somewhere, okay, well, good. You can do X for 8 reps, but I still want you to get to 10 and 12. So we're going to recycle back. We're going to change the movement, and I'm going to purposefully start out a little bit lighter, and we're going to start at 8, right? Okay.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Start at 8. Mm-hmm. Just build it up that. I like very simple progressions, either a rep or a set, right? Because if you chain it long enough, that's a very aggressive training session by the end of like 6 or 8 weeks.
Yeah.
It builds. And that's what I want to do is just get like a 4 to 6 week bridge, right? So they're ready for some higher rep ranges and things like that. I'll probably raise their accessory reps up quite a bit and start with like body weight before I start adding load to it and things like that. But I want that work capacity to go up a lot before I start giving them multiple sets of 12 or 10 reps.
I'll look at that kind of as how much runway can you get out of an exercise?
Very much, yes.
Where, more advanced lifters, that runway decreases.
Sure, 2-3 weeks maybe.
But it can increase if you start with slower tempo.
Yes.
So you might be able to
build modifiers.
You might be able to build 2 more weeks into a 3-week runway.
Yes.
And that could match very nicely with what their main lifts are.
Right.
To have a better looking block or easier to explain block.
Easy transition into the next stuff. And that's why I kind of try and do is like most, the training I write is really week to week. So I can take into account fatigue management and things I need to. But the overall trend of where I'm going with that block is to make it a smooth transition into our next strength block, where now we have a wider base of work capacity and GPP, makes the taper up that much easier, and we can really get into some aggressive rep ranges. That's what I screwed up on my last couple cycles on my SBD setup. Was I was in too high of intensity year round, and I got outside of my volume base, right? And things I should have been hitting for triples and 5s, I was doing like doubles and singles. And they didn't help me out in the long run when I was trying to cut weight, right? And still maintain that high level of top end strength. And I know that now. And that's why it was so great to work with Josh and keep working with Josh is, you're going to have some volume. Yeah, you need to be in shape to be able to do it and not get hurt. Get in shape.
Yeah.
Right? That's all there is to it. It's like, it's just taking, I could do the easier thing and just do heavy singles and it's fun, but it wasn't getting me to where I needed to be over the years. Yeah. And like, I did really good at maximizing my acceleration because I'm typically kind of a more slow twitch kind of guy. I have great muscular endurance. It's the faster stuff I have a hard time with.
So it sounds like you were just extending one long block.
I extended that block too long and was focused too much on the skill acquisition and the speed of the heavy single without doing enough of the rep work to build that up more.
Yeah. The one thing that I found with it's a shortcoming of conjugate is you have things spinning in different phases. So let's say dynamics 3 week max over could be 1 week. The accessories could be 6. So there's multiple blocks kind of happening all at the same time.
To kind of line up.
And people have a really hard time conceptualizing what that is, right? Sure. Where if you can build those out to match, that 3 week squat wave, and all these other things kind of match that, it's easier to kind of conceptualize. Here's what this block is. Here's the intent of this block. Here's what this block is. Where what will happen a lot of times with them is kind of what you were just saying there, is they just gets all seen as one giant block where it's really not.
It's not.
And it's impossible to do that. Otherwise, we'd all be benching 2,000 pounds.
Sure. You're right. Exactly. At some point, where's that stick going to happen at? Okay. Are you going to try and do it again? How far back are you going to recycle? Are you going to change up the exercise? Like, what's the solution to the stick?
Mm-hmm. I need to use the restroom real quick, then we'll come back. Summer's here and so is the heat. I've spent most of my life training in unconditioned gyms, and I know most of you that are training in garage gyms, private gyms, black iron gyms, know what I'm talking about when I say the heat sucks. It kills your motivation to go to the gym, it kills your performance, but it doesn't have to if you keep your electrolytes up. That's why today's episode is sponsored by Element. Element is a tasty electrolyte drink with everything you need and nothing you don't. This means lots of salt with none of the junk. No sugar, no colors, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, no BS. It contains an electrolyte ratio of 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. Element can help prevent and eliminate headaches, muscle cramps, fatigue, brain fog, sleeplessness, and other common symptoms associated with electrolyte deficiency. Right now, Element is offering a free sample pack with any drink mix purchase. Get yours at drinkelement.com. This deal is only available through the Table Talk link. Hey guys, if you like and want to support the podcast, remember we have limited edition items. These items can range anywhere from t-shirts, tank tops, sweatshirts, cups. You never know what you're going to get. Check them out at www.elitefts.com. So we're back. Where I want to jump into next would be the gym ownership, business management, where you started your gym as part of a thesis, right? More or less. Right? Internship. Yes. So you started as a part of an internship. So it's probably safe to say you had no idea what you were getting into.
I mean, I'd read some articles on elitefts.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
That was about right? Like, oh, here, Alan Cosgrove wrote something. Oh, I could probably.
Well, that's good that you're reading that.
Totally. Because, that's all I had.
Yeah, that's probably better than the other ones of just what equipment you needed. But even those articles, I was very modest on what we would recommend, because it was always, my advice always was start with what you can afford yourself.
Yes.
If there's no members.
And right. What can you do the most with too?
Yeah.
So I remember I had 2 sleds from Perform Better, the yellow ones, right? I had a parachute. I had some agility hurdles and ladders, right?
Oh, yeah.
I had a couple battle ropes.
SAQ training.
And I had a tire that I found on the side of the road that I just put in the back of my truck one day, and that was our tires. So I got some sledgehammers for that. Had a couple sandbags. And then I had 2 squat rack stands that were rack adjustable, so you could bench out of them too. 2 benches, 2 bars, about 500 pounds in bumper plates, maybe a couple of 100 or 200 pounds of iron on top of that. So I could train.
How large was the place? Or small?
I'm not sure what the standard measurement of a 2-car garage is.
Okay. All right.
But I had the garage, which my dad took everything out of his garage. He put it up and built shelves for a lot of stuff, even stuff for my equipment. My dad has been huge for my business and just giving me the opportunity to do something. And, so it was out of my parents' house. When we were young, my dad built a sport court in the front yard. So we had a nice cement hard top that we could run drills on and lift out there during the summer and stuff like that if I had more people. And then we lived on a cul-de-sac. And so the cul-de-sac is a pretty good strip to the stop sign and back. So if you were running or something like that was your length you would run or do loaded carries with.
Now, was this membership based or was it just personal training based?
It's always been personal training.
Okay. And how did you go about getting clients?
So I moved back to my hometown in Wenatchee in 2013. And I had made an announcement on Facebook hey, I'm moving back to start a gym. We're going to be out of my parents' house. And I have a lot of friends and family in the community back in Wenatchee. And that's kind of why we moved back, was for my son so he could be around, my family and his mom's family. And my first 2 clients were childhood friends of mine, Jared and Mike Zacher, and they started everything for me. And they were very, you want the friends that are the first to pay for your business, right? They were. I still owe so much to those guys, and they're such great, dear friends. And the love you have for friends like that is really something else. And they brought friends in. Jared was working as a a paramedic, so he would bring in paramedics to train with me. And, and word gets out like, oh, this guy's really good and he gets good results and it's fun training with him. And then I had some more friends and family kind of start joining up. And about 6 or 7 months in that 2-car garage, I was already ready for a commercial space. I had enough clientele. I had about 15. And so I started looking at commercial spaces and found a little spot on the north end of town that had 0 foot traffic, no way to even get foot traffic. People wouldn't even know it was there. I didn't have a sign on the billboard or anything. It was just kind of tucked into the corner. And it was a place that had been a CrossFit gym prior. So all the matting was still there.
How large was this place then?
A little under 2,000 square feet.
So 4 times the size?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was a significant upgrade and still had a back patio area that we could do loaded carries, a kind of a concrete area. And then it had a street that would wrap around behind that you could run up a hill and stuff like that. So it was a pretty cool little spot. We could do yoke carries for a pretty long time, sled pushes, everything we really needed. You just couldn't have too many people in the gym itself really training at once. About 12 was the limit.
Yeah. So what did your days look like then?
Well, I mean, I've been waking up at 4 a.m. for training ever since I started personal training, because that's money hour, right? Is that 5 o'clock slot? And you can't pass that up. And so I would wake up at 4, pop out to the gym from 5 to about 9. Because that's when that first break kind of comes around. And I would either stay out there and read content or study or do whatever I need to do, clean a little bit. And then I would be back by like noon or 1 and work till 7.
Did you have because there's that morning that when I was training, that was gold. Those people,
they're the best.
They never cancel. They're
there.
They're the best. They're the best ones.
And they're the ones like you text the night before, like, oh, I'm sick, I'm not going to make it. And they're like, oh, thank God. Okay, you take care. They don't care at all about having to give up that morning slot and sleep in, right?
No, the noon spot was kind of a cluster.
Very difficult.
A lot of disruptions happened there, but that seemed to die about 2:30.
Yes.
3.
Yeah. Before school gets out. Right?
Yeah. But it wasn't, what kind of sucked is it wasn't long enough of a gap between the 5:30
to go do anything.
To do anything. So you're just like stuck.
Yeah. And so I would either train during that time. And that's kind of when I like to train, is mid-afternoon like that. I still do that now. I start at about 2:30 or 3. And then, yeah, you're right. You just wait till the 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, because that's when the athletes start showing up, is right after school. They pop down to the gym, they get their workout in, and they go.
And then what time did it start to wrap up?
Typically around like 6:37. Every once in a while, I would have a later person, like 1 day a week, who would either be like commuting somewhere or whatever, but like it was someone who's dedicated and wanted to train, right?
Yeah.
And so,
well, sometimes that can suck though.
It does, and that would be one, like that first gym, and even our gym now. Originally, they didn't have air conditioning, and Wenatchee, it sits in the hundreds for weeks at a time, and so I would get heat stroke.
Yeah.
In my own gym, and I'd have to cancel on people like, hey man, I've been out way too long today. I'm not going to make it. They knew.
No, it brings back memories of, I can remember many days because the calendar was written on paper because I'm old, and I'd go look and you would see erased or, white out. And I'd have like all cancellations from like 5:30 and then the fucker at 8:30.
Right on.
Yeah. It's going to come in like, this just sucks.
Yeah, because they can't come in earlier. They're at 8:30 for a reason.
Yeah. And you can't go home. And it's, I would work on half-hour appointments because I didn't want to do cardio and all this other shit. And I'm like, I'm sitting here for fucking 3 hours for this half-hour appointment. It was rare, but when that happened, it sucked.
And I had kind of been used to it because that's how it would work at UREC back at Wazoo too, with my personal training clients there. Sometimes you just have a lot of cancellations, but you still got that one late night client.
Is your schedule the same now?
No. My schedule is the most amazing schedule it could possibly be now. It takes a decade to get there, right? But now I work 2 shifts a day on Mondays, Wednesdays. Yeah, on Mondays and Wednesdays, and 1 shift on Thursdays and Fridays. And then I don't work on Tuesday. And then on Saturday, we have open gym, which is free to everyone to come in and train with us. And we run that from like 10 to 12:30. And that's my work on Saturday. And then I write programming on Sundays.
How many trainers do you have?
We have myself, and then we have Monica and Chrissy. There are two independent coaches that work out of the gym as well.
All right. So is it occupied most of the time?
In the mornings and afternoons, yes. There is like dead time in the afternoon.
Mm-hmm. So how do you go about, because you have the online as well.
Yes.
So you have to balance that in those gaps, I suppose.
Correct.
And then I assume you're not in school anymore.
I'm not. So I get the itch sometimes, Dave. Like, oh, what's another doctorate?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, there's a family too. So you got to balance a family. You got to balance all these things.
Right.
So how do you go about doing that while keeping the stress level enough to be able to recover from the training?
It's a delicate balance.
Yes.
It's a very delicate balance. And luckily, like I said before, everything's a skill. Time management's a skill. Stress management's a skill. Nutrition's a skill. And being able to work it all together is going to take practice, and you're going to screw up on stuff, and you're going to overreach and underreach and kind of dial that in over time. What I've found works for me is having my in-person coaching separated into 2 blocks of my day, a morning and afternoon session. And then in between the morning and afternoon session, say I wake up at 4, I still have clients that have messaged me overnight, or they're already trained and send it in, maybe 4 or 5. I'll get those done before I go to work. So get up at 4, answer online clients, do my check-ins, head down to the gym, open it up, and then people start coming in at 5. We'll work to 8:30 with clients coming in. And then from there, I'll typically go home. I'll make myself a full breakfast, not just like a protein shake and coffee before I leave. And that's really been key for me, is getting home and making food and letting that start my real day. And then from there, I'll do some emailing, another client check-in at around noon. So if I need to, I can nap. Mm-hmm. And I'll nap from like 9:30 to noon, which is really huge on getting the sleep that I need. Because otherwise, like sleep-wise, I can sleep 10, 12 hours a day still. Mm-hmm. And I've always been able to do that. And I've always had a pretty high sleep need. And so it's really great that Tuesdays and Thursdays, Saturdays and Sundays, I'll get 8 hours minimum. And then Monday, Wednesday, and every other Friday, sometime, with Fridays now, every other Friday, I'll take my kid to school in the morning. So people will come in just a little bit later on Friday mornings every other week. But getting that nap in really helps a ton with my training recovery. And I've built my day to accommodate that and not have it take away from family time, workload, or anything else. It's right at the beginning of the day. People aren't doing anything. I'm not going to be working anyways. I can sleep. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I'll wake up, do my afternoon clients, make lunch. Lunch is typically like my pre-training meal. And so that'll be a pretty big one. And that can be hard, like right after a nap, is having the stomach and hunger. And that's typically my hardest part with nutrition anyways, is just being hungry enough, which is, people think that's ironic for big guys, but it's the case a lot of times. And I'll go back to the gym by like 3 or so, be there till 5:30 or 6.
Now, when you go back in, is that when you train?
On Tuesdays, that's when I train, is when I go back at 2:30 or 3. We have our big group, what I call like the A team. That's our best lifters, and we get together, and we made it part of our schedules that we could train together in the afternoon on Tuesdays. And then we do that again on Saturdays. And then I do accessory days on Monday and like Thursday. And I'll typically do that after clients.
All right. So on those main training days, one thing that I found is if I have to train after work,
yes,
I still need to leave.
Oh,
even if it's to drive around the block,
just get out of it,
just to re-enter, the building in a different mind state to be able to train. Do you see that being the case when you go back to train on the main days, accessory days, whatever? Yeah,
and you're right though. But even accessory days, like I wish I could kind of leave and go back. And
because you enter in a different mindset.
Very much so. The main training days are really great because Tuesdays I have off. So I get to sleep. I get all my food in, all my work's done, and I'm focused on training for that day. It's a very dedicated day. And that's the same thing on Saturday, right? I've gotten my sleep. I'm well fed. Everything's put together to have a great Saturday on those main lifts. When I come in, it's really helped taking the clients out of my schedules on Tuesdays and Saturdays for the most part, so I can really just focus on me.
Mm-hmm. So the main training's twice a week.
Yes.
That's all anybody really needs, right? So
I know. That's how I did 2K. It was just 2 days a week, and I didn't do accessories. It's just like, if you can be intentful and really train hard, because it's only 2 days a week. So that's a lot you have to do to get that recovery in, right? But if you don't have time for anything else,
So how would you put a metric on what training hard is? Right?
Did you puke?
Well,
did you shake? Right? Does anything hurt? Is anything sore? What shape do you leave the gym in? Are you shaking to buckle your belt afterwards, or is your pec cramping or anything like that? Did you sweat through a t-shirt? There's physical metrics of effort.
Yeah.
How much effort do you think you really put into that? Or did you just go in and do a 3x5 and kind of get out?
Well, the reason I ask that is, somebody's going to anchor that with the hardest that they've ever trained.
Sure.
And that may not be that hard.
Yeah, it's very true, right? Well, and that's why you do great things like the train your ass off, right? And that's why having a coach there, and that's what I mean, talk about fun things to do as a coach, is that good, do it again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And kind of let them know that's good and that's hard, but we're going to do more.
Yeah. I think
you build that up.
It kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier of anchoring things.
Sure.
Because I look at intensity and effort as two different things.
Intensity is weight on the bar.
Yeah. Effort is now on the effort scale, RPEs are weird.
Sure.
Right. But if you take somebody through a set and absolutely the HIIT training type.
Yeah.
Take them through, just thrash the shit out of them. Then you can say, that's a 10. You never really need to train that.
You never really need to go there all that often, do you?
But if you need to be in a 7 or an 8 and that's the 10, what was your 10 before?
Right.
And then they realize, oh shit.
Well, I've been at 5 and 6.
If that, 3 or 4.
Sure.
I'm like, no, that effort, can be a little greater. And that doesn't mean the intent has to be, it's just the effort.
Right.
Because people will confuse that with the aggressive, just hammering dumbbells, as hard as fucked up as they can.
Right.
I trained hard.
That was really hard today.
Well, was it?
Yeah.
I'm sure I can have somebody do it really slow.
And I think that's the value of training age and life experience too, is early on, you should be really trying to push yourself and find your limits and where they're at. Again, as safely as possible.
Well, you can get away with it too.
Very, very, especially the younger you are, right?
Yeah.
And so if we talk about training masters, lifters and stuff like that, who don't have a great frame of reference for what a maximal 10 is, that's the bridge.
Yes.
That's what you have to build them up into and give them exposures that they're going to be successful in, but also redefine what that effort is and where you need them to be.
What becomes, and I'm wondering if this has been true in your case as well, is if you come in younger, what it took for you to get from point A to point B is the opposite of what it takes to go from point B to point C.
Sure.
Right? Because you come in younger, you can do anything, curl for 45 minutes. And
it's going to work.
Have god-awful technique. You just recover from fucking anything.
Yeah.
And then you get to this certain point where everything has to be training density, the economy of training, everything has to matter.
Yes.
And a lot of times it's working perceptually less hard and doing less training, less effort, and the brain has a hard time.
It's am I doing enough?
Yes, exactly. And that becomes problematic because if you do a meet, this is where things can get weird. You can do a meet and go 9 for 9.
Sure.
And leave 30, 40 pounds, not just yourself, but everybody agrees on every single lift. you'll think, oh shit, I need to go back and train harder now.
No, you just had the best meet possible,
Exactly.
right? Do that again.
Exactly. Where I would look at that and say, you could just repeat all the same weights again.
Same things, and you're going to have another 30 to 40
and then just go get it. On the same aspect, somebody can go to a meet and just bomb out.
Yeah.
And then the default is, I have to train harder because I just bombed out. Where the default always falls into, I need to do more. Yeah. Where that's not the case. And most times it's not.
It's most kinds of time. And that's where I had a hard time too, because I was really specific for a good chunk and block of training, kind of thinking like, I don't need to do more. I just need to be really intentional with it. But I also need to do more.
Well, yeah, I know. But if you, let's say you have a squat and you leave 40 pounds on it,
right,
the default meathead mindset is going to be, okay, if I just did the same thing again, I got the 40 pounds. But if I do a little more, then that would be 80 pounds. Right.
Sure.
And that's kind of how you process all that. Yeah. Where if you bomb out, it's like, well, I bombed out because I didn't train hard enough. Right. And it's default. It takes a while. Did you go through that same?
Yeah. Path? I mean, I think that's good though, that if you can look back at like your training logs, and I don't keep like formally written logs. That's just not what my body or brain like to do. I like having video logs. That's why I use my Instagram as mostly is video logs of training. So I can go back in training cycles and look exactly how they looked or see how they looked at the time. And most of the time I'm like, man, you're going way too hard in the paint. Like those are sloppy reps. It's too much. You're not in control. That's why you had X result at the meet. And I think that takes a long time to kind of get into that mindset or be able to look at things with that lens is, oh, that was clearly me doing too much. But it also doesn't take like, you don't have to go that far back in training either to see that a lot of times. Like you can think a cycle's really well put together, everything's moving the way it's moving, and you'll come back to that cycle maybe a couple months later if you're looking at it, or a year, and you're like, right here. I could have done that better. And that's the value of experience.
Yeah.
Right. Is being able to just look back at that and kind of like, oh, was that an actually good training cycle like I thought it was? Or were there things I just wasn't experienced enough to understand at the time happening? And now I can look at it and go, oh, okay, that's what was going on.
This will be another, it depends answer.
Oh, good.
But when they all
are.
But as a coach, and say it's an in-person younger client, you see them going down that path, right? And it's a weird place to be in because part of you wants to intervene, right? And the other part is, I don't know if I try to intervene, if it's even going to make a difference or not. Just let this play out. And then after it plays out,
talk about it.
Then you're there, so what's your default on that? Just to let it play out?
Yeah, my default's definitely going to be to let it play out safely.
Yeah, that's how
let it play out the way it should, but they're going to learn so much more in that lesson. It's going to have an emotional attachment to it. It is going to cement itself in their memory, letting them go through and play it out. Right? It's just like parenting.
Yes.
Right? Like we're trying to keep kids safe and everything like that, but at the same time, they need to experience it.
Yes. Well, I think that becomes coaches' maturity.
Yes.
Right? Because you kind of have to, a lot of coaches know more than the athletes, and they want to be able to display and show that. So boom, 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 so it becomes that. And at the same time, other people around you may be coming to you and saying, this is stupid as hell what they're doing.
Why are you just letting them go?
Why are you just letting them doing that? And
I'll tell you why I'm letting them.
Exactly. You know where this is going to go. Yeah. And that's my default as well. Let it play out unless they're going to get hurt.
Unless they're going to get hurt. And even then, like as I'm letting it play out, I'm going to talk to them about it. Hey, way to keep pushing. Let's go. Let's get after it. What I need you to be mindful of that can come about from this pushing, and why you need to be on top of your recovery and your nutrition to the best degree you can for your age, right? And really taking it serious and getting good sleep and making those choices is because this is where that can lead to after the end of pushing. If you've pushed and not had the restoratives to back it up and the recovery management to back up that.
Well, that's a good point because you're using that time to build trust.
Yes. Yeah.
Where a lot of coaches will just let them just do whatever they do and then just focus on the other people that are going to listen. and we've seen this play out
Totally.
all the time to where that is that opportunity.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I'm looking for in coaching is it's autonomy supportive. I want them to make decisions as the lifter. And then with the decisions they make, I want to try and add context to them and understanding so they can see a little bit bigger picture and that they can make those decisions with all the information they need to make a good one.
Mm-hmm. You said earlier that your dad was a national level soccer coach.
Yes. Yeah.
And you grew up around that. So what were some of the lessons learned through growing up in that environment? And because you also study that as well,
yes.
Right? So there's going to be some items that the education reinforces and probably other ones that it doesn't reinforce, but I don't care about those. So what are the ones that you grew up around that has had an impact on how you coach now?
I think early on, both my parents really modeled servant leadership to me, and really made that kind of a theme in how they did their work. My dad was a pastor and also a small business owner.
Can you define that?
Servant leadership is using your leadership as a means in which to make the lives of everyone around you better and that you grow together, and that leadership isn't for me to gain something. Leadership is for me to provide a service, a direction, and multiple person support in all of our quest and goal to get where we're going, right? And that we're in this together. And that by being a servant leader, I can assess and look at the abilities of those around me and put them in roles and responsibilities that are going to help facilitate that mission accomplishment.
Yeah.
That's what I tend to think of with servant leadership is really making sure I myself am focused on the goal of the group and that the group has roles and responsibilities within it that also facilitate that goal accomplishment.
How did you see that play out with the athletes that he was working with?
And so how Dad would do it, and Mom too, because she's a teacher, is they would find, the natural leaders within the group. Sometimes it's the best athlete. Sometimes it's the athlete that all the others kind of look to first, right? Before they go about and doing stuff. You can see it in small group dynamics. And he would just give them little roles and responsibilities. Hey, Jerry, can you bring the ball of bags over here and be responsible for that? Hey, John, can you help us set up cones, right? Hey, Sarah, can you take this group and we're going to go do small-sided drills on those cones. You take that group. These are 10-year-olds, right? And that's what I did at 10 was we would go and we would do soccer and baseball clinics in the summer all around, our area. We'd go camp, right? And just be at a campground for a week, running clinics all day. And then we go home over the weekend. And we did that for a long time growing up. And we were given, me and my two younger brothers, like really quick early on, we were entrusted with small groups of kids for instruction and just given responsibility at a level we could manage. And then it grew from there. And they just, at time and time again, whether it was at the church or teaching, they also ran a Sunday school at our church, and we would do big summer camps. And that's what they put on my whole childhood growing up. And so I really got a great firsthand view of leadership in a variety of different modes and models and environments, and really getting to see like how group dynamics work and how you can build roles and responsibilities within a group to help, achieve whatever mission you're trying to accomplish.
Now, in the Marines, was that the same type of leadership or was it a different type
Marine
of
Corps
leadership?
was really hard for me because by the time I enlisted in the Marine Corps, I'd had my dad, man, thanks, Dad. When I was a senior, every week we would go to breakfast. He'd take me out to breakfast, just me, which is great. I had two younger brothers. They did travel soccer and Dad was coaching and he spent a long time with them. So it was his way to like invest some time in me and get some, one-on-one time with the oldest. And we would talk about leadership. We would read John Maxwell books, 7 Habits of Highly Effective Leaders for other stuff. We would just go through the literature. And I was in ASB, vice president for through the student body and like kind of just starting to figure out my way and how I related to leadership in general. And I get into the Marine Corps and I quickly come to realize, leadership just means you've been here the longest, right? And then, yes, there is rewards for excellence. And I was promoted for meritorious a couple times during my Marine Corps career, just being good at what I was doing. But most of the time, the people in charge were just who'd been there long enough. And they were not great communicators. And they were okay at delegating and stuff like that. But even then, some of the higher position people were wasting their time worrying about the smaller stuff that their sergeants and corporals and everything should be taken care of and not the gunny. But it was a very difficult adjustment. But in the Marine Corps, very good leaders stick out right away. And there were a couple of very good leaders that I was fortunate to be under their command in my MOS that I really took a lot of lessons from. And they were very, very good at putting roles and responsibilities on younger service members to prepare them for leadership later on.
So if you take that experience, your father's experience, and the educational experience, and the gym ownership experience, what would be the top qualities of leadership in your opinion?
I think the top qualities of leadership is a desire to do something with it and not just accrue power for power's sake, not just to like lord over people and have that validate you, but instead use that leadership to accomplish something with a group of people that you all get to share in the rewards of that mission accomplishment with. So it's the idea that leadership isn't for me, it's for the people around me and the group I'm leading. It's for all of us to accomplish things together. And it's, similar to coaching, like your PRs feel great when you hit them personally. You coach someone to PRs, and that's a completely different feeling, of happiness, of pride in someone else, right? And just, it's kind of similar with leadership to me, is like, I can be doing this for myself, or we can be doing this together, and what we feel and accomplish together is so much greater than just by myself.
So when you say, coaching other people to their PRs, when you make that statement, what are some of the visions that come to your brain that you remember of cases like that?
Oh, gosh.
There's always some that stand out.
I have a couple. One of my favorites is my dad squatting 402 at 58. And he bled out his head because it was so much pressure. And something, my dad's, a soccer player growing up. They won a national championship in college, and but he's a soccer player. He's not big or strong or anything like that.
Was this in a meet?
No, this isn't train. He just did a meet this year and did really well, but he's 64 now, and he doesn't hold on to the same. Yeah. He squatted 335.
Yeah,
it's pretty good.
So when he squatted at 402, how did that make you feel?
I just remember like the most excited, amped up, like this is my dad doing something I love to do. And he just hit a huge number, right? That like my youngest brother, who's the next like top physical dog in our family, right? Like Josh would really struggle with a 405. And now dad just did it, like 30 years older than Josh, right? And it's the first time he's ever done it. And I just had a almost 60-year-old man build up to his first 405. And now he gets mad if he doesn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to ask what happened next.
Yeah. And so it was the same thing for him. Just wide eyes, like, just couldn't believe he did it. The other one is my lifter Tanaya, when she broke the 220 women's world record in total in Canada last year. I remember that whole day kind of in slow motion, just exactly how she went through each lift, how composed she was. She's hitting 320 benches, right? 500 squats and sleeves, mid 5 pulls, and just like the perfect day and the execution and just like the confidence on her face. Then she comes back and breaks it again at the American Pro 2 in the fall, her own world record. We just chip it again and push it up a little bit higher. And again, like the discipline of seeing where she's come as a lifter. We've been working like 7 or 8 years together.
So where'd she start?
She started like not even a 300-pound squat. Her bench was maybe 170, 180. So I knew right away.
So there's training experience behind it to start.
A little bit.
Yeah.
She had done some CrossFit and things like that, but technique's rough, leverages aren't filled out and things like that. There's not a lot of mechanical knowledge of the lifts. So it was a lot to like up her game to now you're the world record holder in that class. And it's good. That record's been broken since. And I'm glad because I told her, I was like, you're a 1400 plus lifter. So I'm really, 1377 is great, but we're not done.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that record got broken because it's that little kick in the butt. Like, hey, we got work to do still. Like, that's your record. No one's going to take that from you if we really push the way we need to. And that's what she does. She buckles down and gets after it. It's, I remember my best friend, Nate. Again, I've been with Nate since Wazoo. And I remember the first time he squatted 832 at my gym for his he has like a 2182, I think, total for his best in reps. And he squatted 832 at my gym. We'd had a crazy training prep. Nothing was super consistent, right? And we hit maybe like a 765 in reps at the end of it. But we got to the meet and it was strong that day. And we kind of just went for it. And I just saw my best friend, squat 832. And the guy before had his lever belt blow out at 804, right? So it dumps forward, thumb stuck in under the bar, whole mess and everything, gets back to the ER, comes back, finishes the meet, still benches 5 and pulls almost 8 with a torn up thumb, right? Like, God, I love powerlifting.
Yeah, you don't need it.
Right. And Nate just came up to the platform right after that and did what he needed to do. Right. And had a big 5 bench that. And Nate's dealt with a lot of pec tears as well. And then we have a bench crown between me, Nate, and Brandon. Whoever benches the most is bench king.
You have a crown?
Yeah.
Like a Burger King crown?
Well, it's more metaphysical than it is physical.
Well, you should get a Burger King crown.
It's going to be something super trashy like that. Absolutely. And he had ended up taking the bench crown that meet and everything. Had great 800-pound deadlift as well. And this is back in like 2017, 2018. So it's a huge total for back then. It's a top 5 total in the world at the time. And it's my best friend.
Yeah. Right.
That we've been doing this together since we met each other at Wazoo and started powerlifting. And it's just, it's stuff like that, and I've gotten to see him compete at the current US Open with Tanaya and stuff like that. And now my best friend Brandon finally hit his 2K total and he smoked it to like a 2040. And it's the same thing. Like we've been together forever and it's so motivating to see us still continually improve and still like want it. And like have this close group of friends that are still getting after it and just enjoy the hell out of it. And now it's something where Brandon lives in California, Nate and I are in Washington. I see Nate a fair amount, but I rarely get to see Brandon. And now we're at the point in our lives too, where we can travel a little bit more for meets. And now I get to see my best friends and compete with them pretty regularly. And that to me is like, just the most awesome, rad thing that I could ever get out of this sport. And it just means so much to me that's provided that for me in my life.
So after a decade of competing, what keeps you still wanting to compete now?
I can get stronger. I know it. I've had great training cycles still. My bench is still going up. My deadlift is getting better and I'm developing a better awareness of it. And I have zero hesitation, zero doubts that I can't do more and be better. And Josh agrees with me. Every time I tell him a goal, he's like, you can do that. Right. And it's like, Josh has seen some shit. He would just shoot it straight with me if he didn't think if I was wasting my time. And I love this sport so much. It just felt like when I was in that classroom, discovering powerlifting and just learning this was a thing, like this lines up so perfectly with everything I could want to do. And it provides me with a physical expression for improvement, and I can get better mentally. I can get better with nutrition. I can get better with my stress management. It's something through the discipline of becoming great at it has led to every other aspect of my life. And it complements perfectly with running a gym and being a business owner and being a coach. And one of my main things, especially with leadership, is leading from the front. And I want my lifters to see like, oh, Dave still gets after it. Oh, I want to try and beat Dave. I want them to try and beat me, because there's nothing better than you train someone up to become better than you.
Yeah.
Like, that's an awesome feeling. And I work with a lot of submaster and masters athletes, and they just keep getting better.
Well, you mentioned a beautiful thing about the sport is it keeps you accountable for things you may not want to be accountable for, like sleep, nutrition, rest, recovery, stress.
Yes.
Because all those things will screw up your training, which you love to do the most.
I love training more than anything else.
So it's that becomes that really cool aspect that nobody likes to sleep more. Nobody likes to eat well. Nobody really likes any of that shit.
Right.
But you like the outcome of the training.
I love the outcome.
And so it's that if that's not there, then that brings up the question of what's gonna hold you accountable.
And I like feeling good. I grew up a really fat kid. In 5th grade, I was already over 200 pounds, and just had a huge belly. I'm bigger than everyone else around me. I was still a decent athlete, right? But I just had a ton of fat on me, and to find something that gives me a better relationship with my body that is kind of centered for bigger people, right? And not feel like I have to be bodybuilder thin, right? Or anything like that. I remember going into boot camp, I was 250. Two months into boot camp, I'm 169 at the end of the crucible, right? And I still don't have abs, right? There's nothing there. And it was kind of like at that point, I said to myself, okay, it's not going to happen. Don't worry about it too much. And I had struggled a lot to maintain the right weight in the Marine Corps, because at 6 foot, they want you at 203. Yeah. And I would sit more naturally at 230, and I started lifting 240, 250, right? And I'm still doing PFTs and 3-mile runs at 250. And it's not fun. And the lifting side of it was such a breath of fresh air mentally, rather than just going and running forever. Because that's what I did growing up, is I ran forever. Training for deployment, I would run 10 miles a day to be ready for deployment. You just run all your muscle off. I had terrible shin splints. I really hurt my Achilles tendons from all the miles that I was putting on them. And nothing ever clicked for me like being in the weight room did. And to find something, this is weight room and it's a sport. Good. Now I have that competitive edge and itch I can scratch. And I have sports nutrition that can facilitate my performance, and my body's always going to look like it can perform. So as I perform better, I should look better. And that's kind of just what's happened over the years. And it's changed my relationship with eating for the better. It's made me more accountable for what I'm eating and what I'm putting in my body. And that takes time, and it's a skill with nutrition and everything. But to go and be empowered from a kid that's taking every supplement he can take to try and lose weight, to try and look better, right? Because you're not satisfied with how you are and how you look, even though your friends don't really care. Your family still loves you and stuff like that. It just really helped me accept myself more when I could look at myself in the mirror and say, okay, you're a result. How you look is a result of your effort right now and where you're putting it, and have actual tools to change what I saw for what I wanted, and not just scrambling, spinning my own wheels, doing the same workouts like everyone else that would go to the gym, right? And just do the same thing over and over and never get anywhere, or be on a diet, right, for a couple weeks and then fall off because it's unsustainable and you didn't have the right nutrition set up and everything like that. And I made a lot of mistakes growing up just trying to find my place in the fitness world, which I really enjoyed, but didn't really see a lot of examples of me in it.
Were there any topics you wanted to go over I didn't bring up?
I really liked, my favorite part about having the business is that my son can be there. Mm-hmm. And that my son, I grew up watching my dad run his various businesses and everything like that. And I was really appreciative that I could be around for that. And it taught me a lot of great lessons. It taught me how to get along with people and provide customer service and just, get along with others. And that's probably my favorite thing about having the in-person gym now is it's a place for my son to come and just see dad interacting with others and see how adults interact with one another and how a community can be in motivating everyone within it. And, he comes in after school. Now he'll run a mile on the treadmill, right? Because he's getting ready for run club and stuff like that. And he's got track tryouts later. And, he can get his little workouts in and everything, which is really fun to watch him go through and kind of coach him up. And I always find myself so much more present when I'm coaching him. Because again, I'm going to let him pick. He knows how to put together a pretty decent little workout. I'm going to add suggestions here and there, make sure he's doing it right. But he can do it. Yeah. But I just sit there and beam with pride, right? Like getting to see him have his experience, with the gym, like I got to have mine when I was his age. And the things he picks up on are so fantastic. We'll have people, we were doing like a pull-up challenge. And they're sitting there. It was something like whoever can do 500 the quickest wins for the month, right? We'll give them like element salt or a t-shirt or something like that. And so someone just jumped off the bar and just, this is so hard. They're just yelling. And we hear across the gym, my son, it's okay to do hard things sometimes. And just like how he's internalized really great positive messaging and just thinks that's what it is. Like that's what he knows. And he's really just kind of learned it himself just by virtue of being there. Just,
How old is he?
He's 10. Mm-hmm. And I just remember how much it meant to me at 10 to be at the gym with dad and working out and stuff like that. And I'm really glad that I can offer him something similar. Mm-hmm. And it's really fun for me to just have him around and see what he kind of connects with next. Because sometimes he'll just go around and, he'll give some motivational comments to people as they're training. Or maybe he just wants to talk someone's ears off of Roblox for a little bit. And now they have a little bit of recovery built into their training schedule, right? Mm-hmm. And I just think like as a business owner, my goal for the business was to allow me time to be a father. That was something growing up where dad had to work a lot. And when he wasn't working, it would be traveling with soccer. And, he did a very good job of just trying to be there for all three kids. But, you miss time. Mm-hmm. And I really love how much my business has allowed me to facilitate time with my son. And then on top of that, how great my clients are, that they understand like, Mike's got track practice right now. I'm going to be maybe an hour late. I'll have workouts on the board, go through them. If you need me to see something, film it. If not, when I get in, we'll go over everything. And they're very accommodating. They understand how important that is for me and that I don't get that time back with them. Mm-hmm. And it's been, you're always worried, when you're coaching people in person, I got to be there. Right? Like I can't take time off. I can't go off for a week or anything. Like, what are they going to do without me? Well, are you preparing them to operate without you? Yeah. Right? Or are you holding their hands for every single little bit? And I've been really fortunate to get quality clients over the years that, yes, there's hand holding at first, but they know the system. When I write 4x3 squat, 2x3 pause, pendulum 3x10, they know what intensity that should be at, how to load it up on the bar, what their warm-ups are going to be. They know the whole system and they're really good at it. And it's something that's really freed me up to be able to do and seize amazing opportunies like this, Dave. And I really am incredibly appreciative for, giving me the opportunity to come out here and talk on this. And this is bucket list. This is like, I remember me, Nate and Brandon just sitting there like, okay, we hit 2K totals. We get elite FTS sponsorships.
It's always around the total.
It's always the total, right?
Yeah.
And it's great. And I'm really proud of my 2K total. I really, in terms of my accomplishments, right? Like, there's my kid, there's my doctorate, there's my total. It's very high up there, and I take a lot of pride in it. And just coming here and getting to experience this and see it in person I really couldn't ask for a more amazing opportunity. I'm very grateful.
Thank you. I mean, it makes me laugh at what you said, because it's, I can go through the years and there's so many people that I've talked to that,
oh my gosh,
they'd want to write an ebook when those were the things. They're like, well, I can't write it until I get another, all-time world record. It's like, dude, you have 23.
How many?
Like what the fuck does it do? Like 25?
Yeah.
Like what exactly is it? But there was always that one other thing.
Yes.
And, there's a lot of really great coaches out there that are not all-time world record holders.
Sure.
And I do think you need to do the sport to coach the sport.
I do too.
It's but not everybody's genetically inclined to be that all-time world record holder.
Sure.
Nor do they always make the best coaches. So we kind of know that as well. But I think there's a lot of people that have a lot to offer, that they have a lot to give back, but they're hesitant to give back because they don't have the all-time world record or whatever it's going to be, which is sad, because those are the people that probably have the most to offer,
most to share,
compared to the ones that compete once and then start coaching and kind of work that. But they don't last. So they really don't. Yeah. So it's, that used to be something I used to kind of like bitch and rant about. But then the more I started to pay attention, the more I realized none of those people last.
No.
They're around 6 months, maybe a year, then they're gone. The good coaches last 5 years, 10 years, decades, to be able to do that. So when people are looking for good coaches, it's really not that hard.
No, who's been around for a long time.
Who's been around the longest, and you are one of those, which is why I wanted to have you out on the podcast. How do people go about reaching you?
You can reach me on my Instagram, which is Dr. Dave at Ops. It says Dr. Davatops, like a dinosaur, but it's at Ops. You can also reach me via our website at opsgym.com.
Any final thoughts?
Thank you for doing all this, Dave. Like, this is huge to the community to have table talk, and like the lessons we've learned from this podcast over the years and what it's meant to all of us, from coaches to lifters. It's incredibly valuable, and it means a lot to us in the community that you've done it for so long, where other people will start, a podcast and kind of wave in and out. And this is really the highest of quality, right? Like the pinnacle of where we want to be as powerlifters is here.
Yeah. I enjoy doing it. It ended up being something that when I started, I didn't know I wasn't good at it. It's like anything else, I kind of go back and I look, I'm like, oh God, that sucked, and it became the next skill set. Yeah. Like lifting, like anything else. Like, here's this skill set. I have to master the skill set. Well, and that leads down the road. You'll enjoy this. It leads down the road of more communication. Yes. Like, how do you learn communication skills? So you type in interviewing, you start searching that, and that's all about job interviews. Right. And I'm like, this isn't what I want. Like, this is what the fuck is it? Journalism? Like, what? So it created this whole path for the skill sets, and at the same time being able to bring people out who don't have the exposure. Sure. That, we're in an influencer world, but some of them definitely know what they're doing, but a lot don't. But the people who really know what they're doing, they don't have all those followers, nor do they need them. No, you really don't. As a coach, you only need 1,000 followers to have a full schedule. Yeah, exactly. So it's not a super high priority, but those voices aren't being heard. And they're kind of muffled, amongst all the other noise that's out there. So what I've enjoyed about this is to be able to bring people out like yourself and all these other guys that I can showcase them and then provide, here's coaching content, here's training content that's good. Yes. And while it's different, with everybody, right, the similarities are all there. Yes. It's very easy to see. Yes. There's got to be some basic structure. There's got to be some type of auto regulation. There's got to be communication skills. All these things are the same amongst everybody. Even the top lifters who really don't know the coaching. Sure. You can still pinpoint, yes, everybody trains different, but they all, get more specialized as we
Right.
there's
Yes,
all these
different,
patterns.
but same.
Exactly. And those are boring.
Yeah.
Right. But to be able to highlight the boring is what's going to make more people better.
Yes.
So I appreciate you having you out.
Thank you.
We're done. This is kind of like an unboxing. I just got the Element sparkling water. Haven't tried it, haven't opened it. So let's check it out. All the different flavors here. And I will go with the grapefruit, which is my favorite flavor of the pack. Here's the test. It's good. I like it. It's like sparkling water with Element. So it's good. Hey guys, real quick, we realized that something ridiculous, like 80% of the people that watch the podcast don't subscribe. So subscribe to the channel and make sure to check out the description for more details on the guest, links to their pages, and give us a few days, but the show notes will be there. Or not the show notes, the timestamps. Hey, we're just rolling with this thing right now.
Why should anyone join this Discord? Why wouldn't you want to? It's not fake, it's genuine, it's authentic, it's well worth it. The Discord has been nothing short of meeting new people who are incredibly like-minded, giving each other a bunch of ball busting, but also being there to support each other whenever life throws their way. The best part of it for me has also been able to connect with lifters of all levels, help coach, get coached, and also connect with other new fathers who are enjoying the journey of lifting and trying to balance that out. It's the glue that holds all of us together. A common interest will bring people from different walks of life, people who are multimillionaires, these characters and everything else in between, united under one thing, the pursuit of strength.
I think most of us would agree that getting a coach is a great step forward that an athlete can make to make greater progress. But what if you had two coaches? What if you had a whole bunch of coaches and a whole bunch of driven elite level athletes and like-minded people all in your corner trying to make you better? That's exactly what you're going to get with the Table Talk Discord crew.
All right, guys, thanks for watching the video to the end. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and click here, or here for more videos.